great. We're recording. That's good. Boy, I'm good. This is going to be interesting. You're all pretty frozen on there. Okay, so let's get going.
Okay.
Well, welcome everybody to the June 24th meeting of the City of Boulder Planning Board. We do have a quorum. We are awaiting Lupita Montoya. Lisa Smith has advised us that she will not be able to join. She is going to be doing parental leave, so we discuss that a little bit more during matters, but at this point we'll have 6 members once Lupita gets on. Remember, I guess everybody's put PB in front of their name, and I'll hand it over to Jean Gotze to tell us about the rules of participation in this virtual meeting.
Great, thank you, David. Okay, so we are aiming to keep these meetings respectful and orderly, and as such, we have some specific protocol for the meeting. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as democracy for the people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. More information about this vision and the full rules of decorum can be found on the Participate in City Council Meetings page of the city's website. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, dehumanizing language, racial epithets, or other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up to speak using the name that they are commonly known by. So typically we ask for a full name before being unmuted to speak. And currently only audio testimony is permitted online. Kindly note that the chat function is disabled. All questions related to procedures or the online technical meeting should be directed to me, the host, in the Q&A. So in the question place, you can send a question to me if you have a question about the Zoom, the technical aspects, or the procedures for the meeting. And I will do my best to help you and to clarify those procedures. All content-related comments or questions in the question and answer, whoops, I don't know why that screen skipped ahead. All content-related questions in the question and answer will be promptly deleted. We will not respond to them. The board members and the staff should not be reading nor considering any content-related questions or comments in their deliberation. If there are repeated comments or questions in the Q&A that are disrupting my ability to do my job moderating the meeting, I will notify the board chair and issue a warning. And if that continues, suggest that those offending the rule be removed from the meeting. Thank you so much for understanding that these rules are important for keeping our meetings orderly and fair. When we get to the public comment period, so that is open comment, since the public hearing for this item has closed, you will see a raise hand function to indicate that you'd like to speak during open comment. And this should be easily found at the bottom of your screen. You'll note that you'll see a chat button, but if you click on that, that chat is disabled. The question and answer is again at the bottom, if you just kind of hover at the bottom. So I will call on those who have raised hands and unmute them. At that time, you'll have the ability to unmute yourself, but you won't see it until your turn. Testimony will be by voice only, not video. Any participants on the telephone may press *9 to indicate that you'd like to speak during the open comment. Please state your name and address for the record. And I will aim to tee up several speakers so folks know when their turn is coming up. For the open comment, you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. I don't really like cutting people off, but I will mute you out of fairness to everyone if you go much beyond the 3 minutes. And let's see, I mentioned the full name. I will ask for that. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you so much, Jean. And I hope everyone can still hear me. Jean, can you just confirm that I'm coming through loud and clear? Since you
are coming through.
Excellent. And thank you all for bearing with us during the technical difficulties. For some reason, my Zoom is just not cooperating, and I really can't even see faces. So I'm just going to rely on audio, but I was able to see your display, amazingly, Jean. So, so with that, we have no minutes to approve in this meeting. So let's go ahead and move right on to then the public participation portion of the meeting. This is the time where the public is welcome to address the board for up to 3 minutes and on any item that is not related to our public hearing item, which we're going to be deliberating on later. It's going to be a continuation. So please refrain from saying anything about the Gunbarrel Celestial Seasoning Spine Road site and use review. Any other subjects are open, but those we are no longer able to take any consideration because we heard all of the evidence in our previous meeting. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jean to please lead us through that. And as Jean mentioned, I think we're going to use the raise hand function for speaking.
That's correct. Thank you, David. If anyone would like to address the board for open comment, not on the item under consideration tonight, please raise your hand now. I'm seeing none, David.
Okay. Well, last call for hands for public speaking. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move right into our continuation item for tonight. So let's see. We are still waiting for Lupita. Let me just see if I have any updates on Lupita's availability.
David, I just spoke with Lupita, and she said she was trying to get to her apartment. It was 2 minutes away. She said it was about 5 minutes, so I think she is just about to join us.
Yeah, she said less than 15 minutes when she texted me. So I would recommend that we go ahead and take an early couple minutes break, I guess, because this is it's kind of important that we get Lupita on for this. We actually were asked by the applicant to move the deliberation in order to get as close to a full board as we could. So so let's go ahead and take a couple minutes break, and hopefully Lupita will be here by 20 after the hour. Okay, I do see Lupita in the attendees list, so if we could get her promoted, then we should be at 20 after the hour and we'll be able to resume.
Okay, there's Lupita.
Sorry, everyone. Apparently my phone would not catch Zoom this time, but I am now. I was trying to connect while in transit, but it wouldn't connect.
Well, Lupita, you're not the only one who's had trouble tonight. I am having so much trouble that nobody's going to be able to see me tonight.
Oh.
So at least you're coming through loud and clear. That's great. So we should have everyone on, and we were taking a break until 7:20. It is now 7:20. Do we have everyone back?
For the record, it's 6:20 in case anyone in the public is confused.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, it's 8:20 where I am.
Oh yeah, 6:20 where we in Colorado. Okay. So the board, I think, has the ability to use the raise hand function, and I think I'll need people to use that tonight for me as chair to call on you because the videos are not coming through. So when we get to points where I'm calling on board members to speak, please use the raise hand function. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us on to item item 3 on our agenda, which is the continuation of the Spine Road Gunbarrel site and use review. So, and before we go into that agenda, I just wanted to take a moment to remind the board and the public once again that we are asked not to read the comments in the Q&A function. That function is only for participants to resolve logistical and technical issues with city staff. So go ahead and ask in the Q&A if you have any trouble raising your hand or have a question about speaking. But we're not going to be looking at that. And also, when you're in the Q&A, it's really good if you can be respectful of staff. They do a lot of work to try to make sure everything is going well under these difficult conditions where we're meeting virtually. So please understand that they're doing the best they can. And when you kind of, if you kind of criticize the things that are beyond the control of staff, it can really make the meeting not productive and be frustrating. So realize that these policies were put in place through a lot of different folks in the staff to try to make sure our meetings can be as productive as possible. So thank you very much for that. Lupita, welcome. You missed meeting with us live last week, so I'm going to let Hella come on and Hella, if you could just kind of make sure to ask the right questions of Lupita to make sure that we're ready to move into deliberation. And then after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for board members to, if they have anything additional to disclose. So Hella, if you could help me out with that.
So Lupita, we started this particular item last week, as you know, and you weren't present during that meeting, but the meeting was recorded. And I want to ask you if you've had a chance to watch last week's meeting.
Yes, I did. And I saw the secret message from Peter and David at the very end. Thank you very much. You made me smile.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And did you also have the opportunity to review the entire staff memo, its attachments, and the correspondence received for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hella. And now I'll go ahead and ask any board members if they have any additional ex parte communication over the last week or any additional disclosures they would like. And Lupita, of course, if you have any disclosures, if you could please mention those.
No, I do not.
Okay. And does anyone else have any? All right. So we have a pretty good representation from staff tonight. And Lupita, you did not get a chance to ask questions, as we heard from the applicant, from the staff and the applicant. So we'd like to give you the opportunity now, and if that triggers any other board members to have additional questions, we could take more questions before we start our actual deliberations. So did you have any questions after watching the proceedings or that weren't covered by questions that we already asked of staff or the applicant?
I have muted myself. Yeah, my question had to do some of the transportation ones, and I saw the plan, and I believe Elaine answered the question regarding, you know, how much do we know about that plan, when it's going to happen. So I got as much as you guys got about that answer. So it's in the works, some of it. So that was satisfactory to me.
Okay. Sarah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just would like to follow up on Lupita's question. I'm just curious, since we asked the question and then the response was, well, we just don't know, if perhaps between last week and this week, perhaps there's some additional information about the timeline for any of those transportation projects.
Sure. So we have Edward Stafford here tonight. He's a development review manager for engineering. I think he has some updates that he can share with us. Edward.
Good evening, members of Planning Board. Edward Stafford, Development Review Manager in Planning and Development Services. And I do have some project updates that I can provide for some additional background. There was some, of course, in the memo, and we'll get through a little bit more. These are background information. These projects were actually not included as having been completed at the time of the traffic impact study. So it was done independent of these projects, and so it was important to point that out. Let me work through the list here quickly, and hopefully I hit each of the ones you're interested in. I'm going to start with the State Highway 119 multimodal corridor. And there are actually several projects in there, including the commuter bikeway, the BRT, and some first and final mile study that are in a variety of different places. The bikeway and the BRT elements are all in part of the design phase at this point. The goal is to complete that design yet this year and hopefully start moving into implementation in the 2023 to 2024 and later years. Those are all really pending funding commitments. The goal from our transportation mobility department is to see those improvements completed by 2025. However, that is only a prediction at this point and will only occur if those funding sources can be all completed. To put that in perspective, right now, the corridor projects are estimated at approximately 250 million, and there's 90 million committed right now from a variety of different sources and local, state, and federal. They're continuing to work to gather additional funding, including future federal funding cycles that will come up. And of course, with some of the recent work from the Colorado State Legislature, there may be additional funding available there. The last and final miles project is also in its design, or it's in a study phase. And that final draft study is getting ready to be released. It's under peer review at this time. And so that will be coming out shortly. And we'll have a variety of recommendations again for those closer in, including shuttle options in the Gunbarrel area and micromobility. That's a good transition point then into the questions about the shuttle. And you may recall the applicant has in their written materials committed to a funding source of about $200,000 if it occurs within a certain time frame. We were able to follow up with the Boulder Chamber, who's taking the lead on that project, and in fact learned quite a bit from it. They were prepared to move forward just about the time COVID hit. They were trying to finalize some agreements, had some pieces in play, had done all of the study and showed the viability of the shuttle service was strong. And then, of course, unfortunately, COVID hit and a lot of things changed. And that went into a pause mode for a period of time. They are now picking that back up and are working actively to progress with it. This potential funding would provide most of the first year of funding, and they would expect that if successful, they would be able to do that in the next year or two as that funding comes through. And as that first year of success is demonstrated, they believe they will be able to find the ongoing funding partners from the business community, from the city, from the county, from others in the area. Their analysis showed very positive to how that system would connect to 119 and to the regional routes. If there are more specific questions on the shuttle system, I do believe there's a representative also from the Boulder Chamber present tonight who can answer that. Finally, there were some questions on some trail projects that were mentioned. The first, and I've got to make sure I get all the right information here. There are several of them. One of them is a Boulder County-led project, the connection of the Cottonwood Trail to the Lobo Trail. That one is in final design. They've been looking at a variety of options and have landed on options of some separated from the roadway system. with the hope for that to go into construction soon. But I think they're still working actually to make sure that they've got the last of the funding available. There was also discussion of a project that is city-led on the south side, the airport to Andrus Road. That's a two-phase project. Phase one is under construction right now, which is the north piece of it. The second phase, they're working on some final land agreements for one crossing and to finalize the funding with the hope that that would start under construction in the next year or two. I think that covers the variety of different transportation projects that there were questions on, but if not, please let me know and I'm happy to try and answer any other questions.
Just one more question. Thank you, Edward, so much. I really appreciate all that additional information. It's very helpful. And maybe this is a question you can answer, and maybe the gentleman from the chamber needs to pop up. But the first year, what you said was the first year of funding would be, assuming that they're able to raise the funds, that would cover 1 year. So what's the actual annual cost of running that shuttle?
Sure, the annual cost is somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000, depending on the number of shuttles. Their intent right now is to start with one, but then with success would expect that it would be best served using 2 on-demand shuttles, and that's the $500,000 cost.
And is it an
annualized cost?
Is it a pay? Do you pay? Is it part of EcoPass? What's the utilization process?
So my understanding is their goal is that it's a free shuttle service. It is not part of the RTD system. They have actually been working with Via Transportation as a contract for it. And they're looking at funding sources, including business support, local government support, that would be the ongoing funding. That's the high level that I know. Certainly, I know Andrea Mingal of the Boulder Chamber is on. You might want to ask if he has any additional information he can provide.
Do you have any additional information?
Great, thank you,
Andrea,
for
for
attending.
Yeah, hello, this is Andrea Menegal. I'm Director of Public Affairs at the Boulder Chamber. And I think Edward covered everything really well. As far as the funding, we do have a projected cost and budget that's about $200,000 to $300,000 to run the shuttle. VIA can provide the service based on the budget that's being provided by the applicant of this project. And we look at that as seed funding to get this started. It would be free service to anybody in Gunbarrel that would want to ride it within the service area. And the service area is being projected as what's been modeled from the Celestial Seasoning Spine Road project area all the way out to about 75th and Lookout, and all the residential to the east going down to Celestial at about that same latitude. We're anticipating about 12-minute waits at the most for a service area like that, and the service would run Monday through Friday. So if we can get it going, we have good indications from conversations with folks like RTD who are trying to supplement their lack of service in Gunbarrel and their service reductions with partnerships such as these to be able to not have their buses to run and not have their drivers to provide, but being able to contract with somebody like VIA that can provide their drivers and buses to provide that service. And our role at the chamber is to continue to work with our employers, continue to receive funding from them, continue to look for grants and get those in place from RTD. The county has indicated interest, the city has indicated interest if budgets are to improve, and the Regional Air Quality Council. And there's also infrastructure support that could be coming from the state on the last bill that passed, in addition to supplementing a rule that's being created, the Employee Traffic Reduction Program that is being looked at by CDPHE and the Air Quality Control Committee this summer.
So 75th and Lookout is east. How far south would the service go?
The service area was modeled and projected in the State Highway 119 first and final mile study. And to the south, let me just pull up a map. I'm sorry, Sarah.
That's okay.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm right about to grab it right now.
And while you're looking,
Right about
so
there at Sleepy Time, going across White Rock, and Gunbarrel Avenue to the south was what was modeled, but it can be adjusted, customized per VIA's service plans and any kind of, further input we have working with the city and their transportation planners as well.
Okay, so it's really just a shuttle to 119. It's a one last mile, first mile shuttle. It's not meant to go beyond that sort of diameter.
Well, no, actually like a gun-barrel circulator. And so it'll be operated on-demand technology. And also part of that is there is a mechanism there. I'm not exactly sure with it. I can follow up, but to also serve people that may not have cell phones so that they can access it as well. And it would basically operate like an Uber or a Lyft. It would be a 14-person Sprinter van, and it would circulate Gunbarrel in that service area.
Sorry about that. My computer froze. So I got Gunbarrel circulator. Thank you. That's good. I got what I needed.
Okay, John.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, actually. Pretty cool. Thank you. John, you have a question?
Yeah, just to follow up on the shuttle description, is the intention for it just to circulate in Gunbarrel, or will it be running into Boulder, carrying people back and forth between downtown Boulder and Gunbarrel?
What was modeled in the State Highway 119 first final mile study was that service area and that circulator to make the connection to the regional transit along 119. However, in further conversations with the project team and VIA, it was considered, can we get folks into Boulder? And so that is possible. VIA indicated that there are opportunities to do so. It just depends how we want to further program that service, but there is the flexibility to look at that if that is the desired, operating plan of that.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify the financial arrangements, if I understand correctly, the only commitment you have at this point is the initial 200 grand that the project proponent is proposing to contribute. Can you describe other participants more clearly?
Sure. I provided a description to staff at some point through the applicant about our intentions. But basically we had a significant contribution from the Regional Air Quality Council before COVID. COVID impacted that contribution. The city was looking at what it could contribute out of a mobility fund. The county was interested, and we were drafting our project charter to define those more specifically right when COVID hit. Right now, we have contributions from private sector employers in Gunbarrel that are interested, that are willing to contribute. And then we have these discussions going with RTD. We don't have firm numbers in place, but we do have good indications and willingness to explore what can be contributed from the county, from RTD, from the Regional Air Quality Council, and potentially as part of what comes out of E-Trip. So it's continuing and ongoing, but what we've also heard from partners such as NREL is once you can implement a project, seed it, get it started and funded, so that they don't have to get it off the ground, they're always willing to, or often willing to contribute to see kind of how much further they can expand the service in order to get benefits and monitor what those benefits are. So we have a lot of interest, John, but at this point, in order to get it off the ground, to get it implemented, to see it really happen and connect to a regional transit, right now it's this private sector opportunity that's the opportunity to get it started.
So right now, the only actual commitment is the $200,000 from the project proponent for 1 year.
Firm.
I mean,
yeah.
Expressions of interest.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
However, yeah, there has been more.
Thank you.
There's been more.
Great. Okay, well, that was good updates on the transportation and the shuttle. Any other questions before we start our deliberations tonight? John? Yeah,
I was hoping to get more information about the attitude of the libraries to the proposal to have a small library in this project. And I thought I saw on the list of attendees the director of libraries. So I wondered if we could hear from him.
Yeah, David Farnan, library director, was kind enough to join us this evening. So David.
Yeah, good evening, John. Good evening, Planning Board. John, did you have a specific question about the Spine Road development in the library there? I can say that the Boulder Comprehensive Plan has called for city services in Gunbarrel for quite some time. The library's master plan in 2018 called it out, the Gunbarrel Library, as a high priority. I've been out I've heard from residents, as has the Library Commission, for the entire time I've been in Boulder, I think for the past 8 years, for the demand for a library. And so I'm out there quite frequently. I think I've spoken to at least 4 or 5 developers with projects, I think one of which has come before you before this, spoken to every property manager that I can get a hold of. So we've been looking for a location in Gunbarrel for quite some time. And this one, the meetings went very well. We asked for the basic parameters that we look for, which in a corner library is 1,000 square feet, minimal or no rent, and for a lease of 3 to 5 years, and hopefully for adjacency to some residential and commercial entities. So those are the things we're looking for. This one met all those criterion, and we were excited about the project.
Well, good to hear. So would this location outside of the Gunbarrel, community center be satisfactory, and that would fill your desire for Gunbarrel location and presence?
Yeah, and again, it's a 3 to 5 year lease. So the way we look at the corner libraries, I mean, it's really a test market, right? So we want to test to see that there's been demand. We know there are a lot of card holders in Gunbarrel, and they are in proximity to this location as well as the town center, but they're spread out all throughout Gunbarrel. We have roughly, it's between 12 and 16,000 card holders in the Gunbarrel area that would make this the closest location. So yeah, we anticipate that it would be a very vibrant location. In the North Boulder Corner Library, we've been there for 7 years prior to the pandemic. And now, we're in the midst of building a building. That's kind of our template. And it's been a template that I've used in other communities prior to coming to Boulder. You go in with a foothold, test the market, see what the viability is for a permanent location, and then move accordingly. Now, there are some of those pilot libraries and corner libraries that last quite some time. So it could be a decade. We look for 3 to 5 years lease agreement with the possibility of renewal. So as you know, in the Meadows community, I believe we've been there since the late 80s in a strip mall.
Right. So this location, it doesn't have any specific parking dedicated to the library, or that I'm aware of and looking at the plans. Is that something you've thought about and are satisfied with what's being proposed in that respect?
Oh, if you ask my customers, no, they would not be satisfied. You know, the availability of on and off street parking and parking in the vicinity will benefit us. You know, the Nobo Corner Library, we had 0 parking, and there's no parking really in the vicinity which was available to our customers. Nevertheless, we topped 40,000 visitors in the first year, approached 50,000 in the second year, and I think by the time the pandemic hit, I believe the Nobo Corner Library, which is 576 square feet, was the most visited location in all of North Boulder. So you know, people get there. There is proximity to housing, which is, you know, housing and transportation are the 2 key ingredients for library soup. When you have a proximity to both good biking and good public transportation, as well as residential, that's really the top ingredient.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
And
John.
I see that there are hands up from the Coburn folks and also from Elaine. So, Bill, did you want to start us off? I think you went up first, and then Elaine, maybe you can chime in if you have something you wanted to say.
Sure, just briefly on the parking, just to correct that misnomer, all the commercial spaces are parked according to the City of Boulder code. So the library does have dedicated parking to it, and that is conformant with the City of Boulder parking regulations for commercial space. We also, none of the parking charts or none of the parking numbers that we're showing count any of the new on-street parking. So that would also be available for visitors. So there is parking both dedicated to the library and public parking that isn't assigned to anyone.
Great. Elaine, was that pretty much what you were going to cover?
In fact, it was. I just wanted to clarify that the parking was accounted for the non-residential uses as well.
Thank you. That's good. Good to know. Awesome. So, John, you still have your hand up. Did you want to ask any more questions, or shall we go ahead and move on?
Sure, but I can let somebody else go if they have questions too.
I'm missing my hand function, otherwise I would chime up. It's George.
Yes.
I had a question. You had mentioned, David Farnan, the idea of a 3 to 5 year lease. Are you, assuming you've seen the terms of that agreement, would the library have sort of options in perpetuity to continue that, no cost lease if you wanted to?
Well, we will be asking in the event that it happens for a 5-year lease and for the ability to renew that. Yeah, so the lease, the city and the library as a test case really doesn't want to enter into a longer than a 5-year lease. I will tell you that the Meadows library, we are still on a $1 lease. We do pay common area maintenance charges, but we are on a $1 a year lease and have been for, I believe, close to 37 years. So yes, I mean, we are, and I'll make the case for why they should consider it. And that's because we drive traffic to a site. If there is any retail adjacent, and my understanding is that they have intention for a cafe or something like that in the area, I know for a fact, and with good data, that we can drive traffic to those establishments. So yeah, I'll make the best case I can for free or $1 a year rent. I mean, obviously, we would not pay market rate willingly after that 5-year period. But we do look at the viability and the successful library and would be willing, I suppose. I don't want to tip my hand here, but we have budgeted in future scenarios for paying a reduced level of rent, not ever paying market rate.
And I think Andy Allison can speak to that more directly if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Hey everyone. Yeah, the intention is to give them as many renewals as they would like at the zero rent. So if that's something that we need to document in some way, we're happy to.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. John, do you still have your hand up, or you?
Yes, on a different topic. So if anybody else has library related questions, I can hold off. Otherwise, I'll move ahead. So I was also interested to understand the history of this, of the zoning and PUD of this area. And what happened to the obligations that have been mentioned in various venues that were associated with the PUD that was issued a couple decades ago. And so that's not library related, but land use related. And maybe Elaine or Charles can respond to that.
Sure, I'll jump in. So the initial PUD was in, I think, 82, and then there was a PUD amendment in 85, followed by one in 1988. The one in 1988 did not identify ball fields for the public. I think the one in 85 identified some play fields for employees. And so there were no commitments to provide public facilities in this location.
And if I'm going to clarify a little bit more, Elaine, I think the 1988 PUD documents do show some ball fields in some area. It's also identified at the same time as deferred parking area, and that the area can't be counted as open space because of that. And it wasn't part of phase one of that development, which is all that has been constructed at this point in time.
So just to clarify on this, the fact that it wasn't built in an earlier phase, does that release them of any obligations to move ahead with those in a later time?
Well, if they went ahead with, so if they wanted to go into phase two, so this PUD was approved in kind of a different time, and it looks a little bit different than the site review applications and approvals that you have done in more recent years, where we require a lot more detail. So it was approved with a lot of detail for phase one, but there were several more phases anticipated, and they had very little detail. And what the plans anticipated was they approved a certain amount of floor area for each of the lots, but it was also allowed to be moved around. There was a general landscaping plan, and then these fields were also shown on the plans, but for future phases. And it just didn't have a lot of detail, and it was approved in a way that allowed them to come in as long as they were consistent or are consistent with what was approved, that staff then approves the additional phases. Now for, I think it's lots 2, 3, and 4 that are in front of you right now, they're choosing to do something different than they already have an approval for. So they're back in front of the board for that. But those plans still exist. If they go into a later phase, then at some point they would have to either amend the plans or build those ball fields. And there were different sizes, celestial seasonings facilities anticipated in the different phases that they were looking at.
And I guess the question I would have is if this is intended to address public interest in ball fields, or if it's intended to be about the celestial seasoning employees, because the terms that were in the PUD identify ball fields for the benefit of employees. So that would be the question.
Yeah, and those were, nothing indicates that they were meant to be for the public, and it's not something that the city can require, that the development constructs ball fields for the public. And the other thing that's changed over time that makes this a little bit unusual is nowadays developments have to be constructed within 3 years or an approved phasing plan. And if you don't comply with the phase, and we set very strict time limits by when they have to be completed, then it expires and they automatically would have to come back for a new approval. But it was different back then. And it was just a lot more relaxed in terms of what developers could do. And the phases were very vague. They only indicated when approximately they may want to do those. And the approval doesn't expire as long as a building permit has been pulled for the start of the approved project, which was the case here. It didn't happen with the 82 approval, and that actually expired because of that, but it did for the 88 approval. It wouldn't work that way anymore today, but because of when they were approved, that is how the law applies.
So if just to clarify, at least maybe I'm the only one confused about this. Regardless of whether it was intended for public benefit or not, the construction of those ball fields was a condition of the PUD, and therefore an obligation at some point of the owner of the PUD. Is that not correct?
But only of phase, but not of phase 1. It's not shown on the landscape.
I understand, but not of phase 1, and now they don't want to do phase 2 or 3. But nevertheless, that was an obligation to come at some point in a later phase. Isn't that correct?
I don't, let me say it this way, I don't consider them to be not in compliance with their approval. Because there were no firm dates on when the next phases were going to happen. There were only estimates in the plans, and that's how it was approved.
I mean, is that your legal conclusion? I mean, I don't understand why just by delaying, they get out of that obligation, which is in effect what's happening.
Well, I don't think that we could enforce it at this point in time, because I don't think they are in violation of their approval. It was just approved that way.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anymore today. We wouldn't do it like this anymore today.
I understand, but just because that was done 20 years ago, it doesn't mean that the obligations suddenly disappear. That's why I'm confused.
Okay. So yes, and certainly we can discuss that more during deliberation. I think we did have one pass at questions, and I kind of opened it up to accommodate Lupita. Do we have any more questions at this point, or are we ready to kind of move into the deliberation? John?
Yeah, sorry to be the one who responds all the time. Yeah, on a different land use question, I'm interested in understanding what the obligations are with respect to using the industrial zoned land for residential purposes. In the staff memo, there was some discussion about the recent decision and modifications to the Boulder Valley Comp Plan for using industrially zoned land for residential development. But it was a little bit unclear to me how the obligation to consider Boulder Valley Comp Plan objectives coincides with that. And I wondered if you could fill us in on that a little bit more.
Elaine, is that, or Charles? Do you want to weigh in?
I'd like some clarification on the question. How does the comp plan policy get implemented, John? Or I guess I'm not understanding the question.
Well, my concern is that the comp plan indicated very clearly the desire to maintain some industrially zoned land, and also the maps indicated what land that was.
Mm-hmm.
And in the latest modification, the city council made some changes in the language regarding that land with respect to encouraging residential development in some of that land with some conditions.
Gotcha.
And that resolution isn't clear to me. And it's applicable in this respect because, for example, one could argue whether this is an infill project or not.
Okay, that's helpful context. Well, so the regulation actually goes back to 2004 when city leadership was having a community conversation about the jobs housing imbalance. So in 2004, there was an ordinance passed, and it was really designed to be a modest approach to allow for some residential uses in areas that were considered to be logical expansions to existing neighborhoods where potential conflicts could be mitigated and where existing residential amenities were in close proximity to some of these industrial properties. So that was really the policy rationale. So there was a series of, industrial areas in town that were identified that had proximity to or adjacencies to neighborhoods. And so the ordinance went on to really require these prescriptive standards with contiguity to existing residentially zoned or used properties, requirements for things like proximity to open space. So in that time since the ordinance was enacted in 2004, we've seen 3 residential developments located in industrially zoned properties. Waterview is the most recent with 260 some units. There was another one in Gunbarrel that was done that was, I can't remember the number of units. I want to say it was maybe 25 units. And then the third one is a property that's across the street from the Boulder County Jail, which again is, I think, 20 units. So I think that we're striking the balance from that policy perspective and how it's being implemented, and really only seeing it in industrially zoned areas that have those natural adjacencies that feel like a logical expansion of a neighborhood. And Hella or Elaine, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I could speak to the adoption of policy 221. I think John asked about that as well. I went back and looked at the different memos associated with the adoption of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. And during that process, the city did some analysis to figure out what are areas in the city where there's potential to add additional housing. And staff identified light industrial areas and the Boulder Valley Regional Center as those. And we have policies very close to each other in the comp plan addressing that as a result of that effort. And the objective was with policy 221 for light industrial to allow more housing and retail where appropriate while maintaining the non-residential use potential. They were anticipating land use code changes to create more flexibility than the current standards have. It acknowledged that there's already some residential allowed in the industrial zones through those regulations that Charles just described. And the intent was to create more flexibility within the IG zone in terms of what are the contiguity requirements. Maybe it's also near a transit rich area that could meet the contiguity requirements, for example, or to allow a broader mix of uses and intensity. And they stated that the IG and IS areas should keep its current zoning in place. So in effect, it describes a policy directive to draft changes to the standards applicable in the IG district.
So can you describe the new policy or the policy changes? For example, with respect to whether there's a mixed use consideration that needs to be considered or
the policy is in the comp plan, but I was just describing for you what the memos described the objective was when it was drafted, and why it was added to the code. It was to create additional future housing potential compared to what already existed in the light industrial areas.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I see the applicant raised their hand, but I'm not sure there was an outstanding question for the applicant.
It was just to respond to that. One quick distinction is, as Hella mentioned, that discussion was entirely revolving around the IG zone, and this is the IM zone. So as was described to us by the city attorney and city staff, that comp plan change was not at all directed on the zone we are looking at now.
Okay, thank you. That's a useful clarification. Great. So are we? I don't see any more hands at this point. So thank you for both staff and the applicant for accommodating another round of questions. I think that was useful, and there was a lot of good information that came out of that. So with that, let's go ahead and go through our key issues, if we could. And let's see. I think actually we're at 8:05. I'm sorry, 7:05. We've been going at this for an hour. So let's allow a couple minutes to stretch our legs and come back at 8:08 p.m. I'm sorry, 7:08 p.m. and in 3 minutes. And because we're trying to take more frequent breaks. So we'll start back up in 3 minutes. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and continue to use this phone just because I still see evidence that my internet is not the best. All right, so we have everyone coming back. I'm waiting for Lupita. While we're coming back, I just wanted to, as we go into our key issues and we do our deliberation, I just wanted to let the public know that I'm sure every board member here heard you talk about your desires to see a Gunbarrel subcommunity planning process in place. And I just wanted to read something from our last City Council letter. We've had a pretty good consensus on the board that we would like to see such a subcommunity plan prioritized. So I wanted to make sure the community knew that. We aren't able to take that into account since that hasn't been done, and we as the planning board don't really have the authority to impose moratoriums on development until such a plan is in place, but we have asked the council to try to prioritize it, and I'll just read you what we said in our letter. Continue to utilize subcommunity planning where appropriate and implementable to ensure meaningful and effective community engagement, coherent area planning, and prioritize a Gunbarrel subcommunity planning process when economically feasible. So this is a message that we have sent to City Council. So I just wanted to bring that up in case people were wondering why they might not hear that during the deliberations so much. So Lupita, are you back with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay. Well, then I will go ahead and start us off. We have two key issues in front of us, and Charles, thank you so much for also giving us a matrix, criteria matrix that we can also use for these two key issues. So I'm hoping we can use those to drive our discussion. So key issue one, is the proposed project consistent with the site review criteria, including those related to consistency with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan? And I'll go ahead and start with a negative poll to see if anyone feels that this proposal or this project is inconsistent, and then after that we can kind of talk through our observations about the consistency. But is there anyone who feels that that there are areas where it does not meet key issue one, the site review criteria?
Hold on, Sarah.
I'm not able to, I see Sarah Silver raising her hand.
And David and John has his hand up too, since you can't see.
Oh, yeah, apparently.
Yeah, so I have some concerns, which I hope we'll be able to address through perhaps some conditions. But I'm gonna, essentially my concerns about the Boulder Valley Comp Plan mirror or echo what Lisa Smith said last week about some of the, let's see if I've written it down here. Yeah, I have, hold on. Some of the—
do that now, or do we want to go through the rest?
Oh,
I just want to make sure we get to it the right way, Sarah, because I know we're going to get to it.
okay. I thought you wanted us to, or just raise our hands that we have some concerns.
I was wondering if people felt that that we feel that it does not meet the site criteria. So if there are things that can bring it better aligned with the site review criteria, we can discuss that when we go around the table. But I'm looking for whether people really think that there's that it's just completely not going to meet the criteria.
You got two hands.
Sorry?
You got two hands and your negative poll, just helping in case you're compromised there visually.
Yeah, I'm looking at John. John, you also feel that it does not meet the site review criteria?
I think there are several issues I would like to discuss with my colleagues on the board.
Okay, well, let's just go then into the discussion and see what the concerns are. Does anyone want to kick us off with just your general observations on key issue number one?
Sarah was going there and I jumped in.
No, that's fine, Peter. I appreciate you. I know David's having a hard time with his technology, so I really appreciate the backup. And I'm
yeah, Peter, go ahead and go ahead, Peter, and maybe you can help me with the calling on people function since I'm having a delay. I do see the hands go up eventually, but then I don't always see what order they come up in. So yeah, Sarah, do you want to just continue then on what what your concerns are and how you think they might be addressed.
All right, so first I want to start by thanking the applicant for having taken into account in their revisions so much of what was said at planning board concept review last year. I really appreciate that you heard so much of what we in the public said. And so my concerns have to do, as you can tell, because my questions were about transportation. I have some concerns about it not really meeting some of the comp plan goals related to compact development patterns and a commitment to a walkable, accessible development and the energy efficient land use. But I think there might be some conditions that we might be able to discuss that could ameliorate some of my concerns because there are parts of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan that in fact the project does support, and it does bring very valuable both affordable and market rate housing to the area. And I don't know if you want me to talk specifically about what, or wait until everyone's had a chance to.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and hear what people have to say, and then we can think about, you know, what conditions you feel might be appropriate. John, did you want to go ahead and continue on your concerns, and then maybe we can hear from some other board members?
Yeah, thanks. Similar to Sarah, there are some conditions that would set my mind at ease on this front. And so I think it would be useful to have a discussion about that. But briefly, the two issues that I'm concerned about are the obligations that were part of the previous PUD that you've heard Hella explain a little bit about. And the concern I have that our industrial land is disappearing despite the objectives of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. And I think both of those issues could be dealt with under conditions, but that's something we would need to talk about in more detail.
Okay. Peter, do we have any more hands up? I can certainly chime in.
No, I think we can jump into to them. Georgie may have indicated something with a slight finger. For the record, not sure, but I think we're good. I think we can jump in maybe in honor of Lisa, who I liked how Lisa laid things out as well and opened it up for conversation, and Sarah picked that thread up. So I think, David, you're free to move on to the discussion if you'd like, unless you wanted to do a negative poll moving forward.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when we do the negative poll, we can certainly talk more, you know, when we go around the table. And yeah, I also want to echo what Sarah said, that there has been an awful lot of improvements in this plan since the concept review. We did sacrifice some dwelling units to make the site more kind of open, have a more open feel, went from 268 down to 230 dwelling units. So I think that gave the applicant the opportunity to really use space nicely. And I see a lot of connected and usable open space, which was a concern of both the planning board and council. The reconfigured parking is very nice. I think we called it, you know, development magic or something when we were looking at it, some sort of way to kind of find a way to address the parking, and I think it looks a lot better. I think the buildings are designed nicely, have a lot nicer design than we were kind of looking at in the initial concepts. So with regards to the transportation, you know, I think about other projects, and you know, when projects come before us, a lot of them do what they can in their local street-facing areas to deal with transportation impacts. And I think that the applicant has shown that there's going to be improvements, and in fact has done a lot of things. So I will be interested in hearing what the board thinks could bring it closer into compliance. But in many respects, I feel like out of fairness, we don't ask a lot of other projects to do things that are just completely out of their control. So, but if we do have something that's kind of criteria based that could be examined, perhaps. But I do feel like it's adjacent to other residential neighborhoods, so it does have a place that, I hear people say it's not a nice spot for this particular project, but in my mind, it's actually a fairly good spot for this project. And also, it isn't, displacing existing industrial, even though it's an industrial zone, and it does meet the definition of how we have allowed for some residential in industrial. So it conforms to the way that the BVCP and our land use code has articulated that we're going to do that. So in my mind, as I go through the different BVCP criteria, as I go through the criteria that Charles has given us in the site review matrix, I have not put a no in any particular row, and I've made lots of comments on those, but I won't go through all of those right now. But I felt that everything in my mind is matching the criteria quite well. So that's where I landed on this after my review. Anyone else want to go next? We've heard from everyone except Georgie and Lupita at this point, and all my screens look pretty frozen. So, Peter, you can continue.
I guess I could speak. I first of all, I agree with the sentiment of the rest of the board, which is that, while I wasn't on the planning board when this was presented the first time, I did review that material, and I do think that there's been a big change here as far as site design, permeability of the site, and massing. I'd like to hear more of the discussion as people's reservations around transportations and possible suggestions, because I too find it a little challenge from that perspective. But I'd like to understand sort of what people have thought about as it relates to transportation and making this site, more accessible, and thoughts around that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Lupita, did you want to chime in before we start making, I don't know if we want to take a second pass with this, or we could move on and do key issue 2 before we start talking about any ideas that people have?
Yeah.
Well,
thank you. Yes, I also found that this proposed project now has a lot of improvements from last year. So I really like some of the changes. And yes, I follow also in terms of meeting the criteria, and I don't have an issue. The major questions had to do with the transportation. I said that, and Ed did a good job giving us an update on it. So overall, I did feel like this is a much improved project from last time. I feel good about it. And the other issue was the whole idea. I think it was John mentioned about us. A project like this, it might appear as we are losing some of the light industrial, but in fact, there was no light industrial built there yet. So it was kind of a sign, but it was clear residential was one of those approved uses. So when I reviewed that part, I said, okay, then we really are not in compliance with that regard. I do agree that in some sense, when we go from one use to another, maybe we were, maybe a little bit concerned, especially with the light use, light industrial. However, given our big imbalance in housing and job generation sites that we have on campus, I'm always a little bit more of forgiving if we are moving into the housing, especially if there is some, some of the affordable housing involved. And in this case, even some for sale, which is, we don't see that often enough. So anyways, so far, but I am really eager to hear what my colleagues have and additional concerns. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Lupita.
David?
And Peter, I think you have some additional comments you wanted to make.
Yes, it's always great to see an improved project. And it's great to see a project that can involve the community in such an engaged way. I want to echo what Lupita said. I really appreciated and enjoyed and second everything she said it and how she said it. I really liked it. The nuances of the site and the balancing act. And so to preserve time, I'll mostly say I'm excited to talk about the topics that some of the board members have brought up, but I really track really closely to Lupita's comments.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm hearing the transportation concern that both Sarah and John articulated. We can talk about that. The PUD concern is something that, I'm interested in what other board members think. My understanding is that this process is meant to potentially, change, what's in a PUD to meet the demands of the current situation, and that it's within our purview to do that if we find that it's appropriate. So I don't want to just, in my mind, I would not want to just try to go back to an agreement that just doesn't make sense given the current situation. However, if there are things in the PUD that are a real concern for people, we could certainly discuss those. And so any other thoughts about the concern that John brought up with regards to things that may be getting overridden from the PUD by what we're doing here? John, did you want to say something on that?
My concern with that is not that I want that original PUD to prevent this project from moving ahead, but it seems to me that the owner who made certain commitments in that PUD has been able to avoid living up to them. And I understand that the owner no longer wants to do what he originally wanted to do in that PUD, but in making that commitment and in obtaining that PUD, it seems to me that there are certain aspects of it that the city should still continue to benefit from. And among those are, for example, the ball fields. I'm clear that there was no commitment that they were going to be for the public, that somehow people think that the employees were going to be the only users of that. But the public benefits from having those ball fields, for example, in having that open space not being filled up by buildings or other uses. And so it seems to me that we need to understand that, and that the owner we need to be clear about what we're losing by letting him off the conditions in that PUD.
David?
I just muted right when you were finishing up there, John. Sorry for the pause. Okay, thank you for that explanation. Peter, did you want to comment on?
Sure. Having looked at some of these documents in the past on different things, and it is always a crazy time capsule to look at some of these and then to tease out what continues on and when those rights extinguish and not, and what satisfy the PUD and going back. And I agree that it bears research, but I wonder if we'd get anywhere, and if we looked across the city and all the PUDs that did or didn't convey the way they were supposed to, or provided more than they were supposed to. And I know that's not what you're saying, John, that you're not wanting to hew exactly to it, because that would not be possible or realistic, and Helen gave us her opinion. However, if it's the open space and a the ability for a field, then that is what we, in essence, are getting an aspect of that with this open space that is open and available to the neighborhood. And so, of all things, knowing that we were never going to get ball fields for the employees because they're not employees in that same way anymore, we're getting something that seems to have come through the passage of time and these documents, that we're still getting something that's a benefit to the community when it doesn't have to be that way. It's a result of the community doing its job and speaking up, and this board pushing, and staff working, and the applicant responding with a few of these gives. And so it feels like, if the spirit of what you're saying is that there's this field and this ball field and this place for people to be, there is still a public space that's open, if I'm tracking you right.
Okay, so yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. Sarah, would you like to?
This is actually not a, this is a different topic, so I will wait until we are done with the PUD discussion.
Okay, well, I think we've heard the concern. Helen, did you want to give us any comments on whether you heard anything that our assumptions may not be completely accurate in terms of
I just wanted to confirm, because John expressed a concern that the buildings may be constructed where the ball fields are depicted on the plans, because they cannot be constructed there without an amendment to the PUD, because it's not anticipating or approving buildings in that location.
Okay.
Oh, can I respond?
Of course.
Yeah, so, I mean, what they would do, so what would be necessary would be for them to go through a process similar to what we're going through right now, I presume.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So basically they get out of their obligations by going through a death of a thousand cuts type approach. You know, they cut a little piece off, ask for mercy on that, go for another piece, ask to be released from their obligations from that, and so on. That's the way it sounds to me like their procedure is.
Well, I think if they were going to make changes to what was approved for Lot 1 that has the Celestial Seasonings approval, that is the one that shows the ball field. Now, it also states that it's planned for overflow for deferred parking if it was fully built out. So the area is not actually intended to count as open space. The PUD says it cannot be counted as open space because the area is also reserved for deferred parking, which I think would only go into effect if, you know, the expansion of the building was going to be followed up on.
Well, maybe, but we don't know what the owner has in mind. But thank you for that explanation. My concern has not been does not disappear.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to issues about open space, and this is more of a comment, and there's no condition that I'm trying to pursue, but the discussion last week about the prairie dogs highlighted for me the fact of what appears to be kind of a failed ordinance. And when Lisa asked the very good follow-up questions about what happens to the prairie dogs when they get moved, and the answer was, well, we don't really have numbers, but what we do know is that the moment they lose the protections that we have physically built for them, we have at least something like 50% drop off. They're eaten pretty quickly by their natural predators. And that just made me, and then I think she also mentioned that Boulder gets a lot of calls from other counties who are also trying to move their prairie dog colonies. I just want to point out that while we may have an ordinance on the books that's meant to deal with prairie dogs and meeting the intention of open space H2A 3 which calls for the preservation or mitigation of adverse impacts to natural features and species of special concern to Boulder County. We may have an ordinance, but that ordinance, I don't think the ordinance achieves its goals or enables us to actually feel good that a project achieves the goals of the ordinance. So there's nothing we can do about it in this case, but I think it's worth pointing out that it's a bit of a hollow law in terms of its outcomes.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that I think your comments should be said during this deliberation. I think it's many people in the community do care very strongly about this issue, and we know that what we're seeing here is that you know, the applicant's going to follow the guidelines that have been prescribed, and they were put in place carefully through a big process. But you know, it'd be kind of nice to see in practice a little additional effort made to try not to go through the steps, and we would certainly appreciate that, and I know the community would appreciate that. You know, we always try to stay away from the lethal means whenever possible. So, and I think Lisa, like you said, Sarah, Lisa expressed that last time as well. Do you have your hand up, Peter? My screen is still kind of crazy.
No, I've never used the hand function till tonight for you, and I've forgotten after that. Sorry.
Okay. Well, and again, Peter, anytime you see someone that I'm missing, just chime in.
Well, I also invite the board to pop up with
glad
that.
that I have
Your best prairie dog impression of them saying David's voice. David.
Yeah, I can see, at least I can see faces, but they're all kind of frozen right now. So thank you. Okay, well, with that, let's go ahead and put a bookmark on key issue 1. The second key issue is, are the proposed residential uses consistent with the use review criteria? And I think we can expand on, you know, some of the, you know, certainly consistency with the zoning, which has already been discussed in conjunction with key issue 1. The impacts, compatibility, and character of area are all in this area. Are there any additional things that we haven't covered that fall under the use review that people would like to talk about now? Seems like we kind of
John raised his hand.
John raised his hand. Thank you for that. I'm seeing a frozen screen. John, go ahead.
Yeah, not to drag this out, but my concerns remain about the use of land that is intended for industrial purposes for residential. I understand the change that was made in the last version of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, but my concerns remain as well.
And David, if I could follow up on that, John, if you remember last year, we all discussed, I even wrote notes on my copy of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan about expanding 2.1, sorry, what did I do with my Boulder Valley Comp Plan? The comp plan goal that you guys were talking about, the 2.21 light industrial areas, we had actually discussed expanding it to cover all industrial areas, not just IG, in order to try to address this concern. And I think staff took it up to council and they chose not to act on it, but maybe it's something we can bring back separately and try to push it up to council again.
Yeah,
and
that may
go ahead. Could I go ahead and chime in, and then I'll hand it back over to you, John. I just want to also remind us that we, you know, there is tension between different comp plan, you know, values, and there are some very strong values around the jobs housing imbalance, and also inclusionary housing, which we're getting on-site inclusionary housing with this proposal. So affordable housing is a big one. So I think we just have to keep in mind that, you know, we're probably never going to see every last value expressed in the comp plan matched precisely, because sometimes there's just no way to do every single one of them precisely. So that's why, on balance, we're looking at whether we're comfortable with this. And for me, getting a really good, strong inclusionary housing proposal with some fairly good housing opportunities at market rate are pretty reasonable justifications for building on this particular industrial plot. So with that, I'll hand it over to John.
Oh, I've said my piece. So.
Yeah. I'll jump in.
Yeah.
If possible, if that's okay. I like that John brought this up, and I know he sometimes brings things up to make sure we all remember, because he does have the longest memory of all of us of all these items, which I think is amazing. That similar to comments that were made around community benefits too, and creating a cluster. I do not want to see loss of industrial, but I also look at this site and I see predominantly residential around it, and compatibility. And I want to save John's comment and make sure we keep bringing it up in a more focused way. And in the past, John's asked for actual metrics on the amount of industrial. And so there are areas that are not greenfield sites that are industrial that, as Lupita mentioned in her comments, we need to really safeguard and get more creative and proactive in how we plan those for today and tomorrow's industrial user in a knowledge-based economy like Boulder. And then also knowing that, although it seems a little over the top and it's just too broad, but if we don't provide housing, there won't be industrial users because they will not have anywhere to live, the workers, and so they'll just move away. So I like the idea of preserving industrial that exists in this place. I can echo David's comments that I can look beyond that tension in terms and see what we are getting in terms of housing. If this was an industrial site that was taken out of commission for this, it would be, I would feel differently. I also know that the comments that we heard for several hours would have been different comments around the factory the light industrial that's going to be next to their condominium development. So we can't win here, but I can accept this one. And I wanted to echo John's comments and make sure we keep bringing those up in places where we have some pretty heavy duty industrial that's we need to really preserve and be proactive with. John, I see you have a hand up.
Thank you, Peter. Obviously these are issues that have nothing is ever black and white in them. But I do have a suggestion for how we might move ahead, and that is with the condition that would place some obligation on the development of the rest of the Celestial Seasonings land to be reserved specifically for industrial purposes, and not to place some sort of condition on the development of that land, either for industrial or for ballpark open space purposes, because I'm sure we're going to be faced with an application for that land coming up soon, and we may as well, while it's all owned by the same owner, it is possible for us to place a condition on the use of that land that we should consider.
Ask Hella if it's not a proposal in front of us, if we can pursue such a conversation.
Thank you, Hella. Yeah, I'd be interested in whether there is a precedent or whether we have the opportunity to put conditions on something that's outside of the subject site, because I'm not sure I know that we've ever done that before.
Well, in general, you are amending an existing PUD, so I think you can look at the entirety of the PUD, but if you talk about conditions, I'd encourage you to talk about what review criteria are not met without imposing that condition.
Well, thank you, Hella. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that kind of a proposal simply because we do have our criteria in place for a reason, and that is to be even-handed. We have the opportunity to change criteria when we update the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, and when we look at opportunities to do any kind of rezoning or through the legislative process. So I personally find that to be something that I would be not very supportive of at this point, because I would be concerned that we're just kind of singling out a particular property for no fair reason. But that's my opinion. But I think what we could do at this point, since we've talked about the two criteria, if somebody else wants to has anything they would like to discuss, please bring it up. If someone wants to make a motion, we can actually have a discussion on the motion and then go through any kind of adding amendments to the motion at that point, if that's a way that people want to go. But
well, shouldn't we have a conversation about some of the conditions that concern us first, and then we can talk about how we might what kind of motion we might present, because the motion that's offered up by staff has a set of conditions, so we would be discussing some elements to add to or subtract from the conditions. Wouldn't that be the...
There's two ways we can do it. One is if somebody wanted to make a motion, we could do it through the amendment process. But if you would like to address that, I'm totally open to examining possible additional conditions before the motion is made.
Sure.
So I'm not going to jump.
I think that might be the easiest thing, because if there's no support for what I'm going to suggest, then it'll make the motion making process a lot simpler. And if there is support, it will also make the motion making process a little bit simpler.
That's true. That's absolutely justified. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and give us some of the ideas around motions that you think would make this come into more compliance with the site review criteria.
Okay, thank you. So the two, and I'm sorry to keep looking over to my left, but I have all my notes on a different laptop. So just, I'm not trying to be rude, just trying to get to my notes. Okay, so the two criteria that I think are not as well met as they could be are they're both circulation criteria. H2D4, which is alternatives to the automobile are promoted by incorporating site design techniques, land use patterns, and supporting infrastructure that supports and encourages walking, biking, and alternatives to the single occupancy vehicle. So as you could tell, because of the questions I was asking about this, what's the timeline for the various hoped for transportation elements, almost all of which are out of the city's hands. But the one that does seem to be sort of something a little bit under control would be the $200,000 to the chamber for the shuttle service. And in the TDM plan on page, what page is this? I'm sorry, on page 323 of the entire packet. I'm just going to read what it says, and then I'm going to offer up my thoughts about it. The applicant will contribute $200,000 to fund a first year of the Gunbarrel shuttle service that the Boulder Chamber is working on to establish, provided the shuttle is established no later than 18 months after issuance of the last certificate of occupancy for the development that completes the development. So my concern about that is that 18-month window. And it seems to me like there's some way to write a condition that eliminates that window and instead compels either the developer or whoever is the owner of the site at the time of final occupancy certificate that the guaranteed payment of $200,000. Tried to come up with some language. I don't know if this is going to be the right language. So Hella, it says applicant or owner of development at time of certification of occupation approval shall provide $200,000 guaranteed to the appropriate entity to support a shuttle service. And I wrote down between Gunbarrel and Boulder, but I think that phrase is inaccurate given what the chamber has described. But that's the kind of language that I would be interested in making a condition.
I'm with that language around the shuttle. If your concern is that it's not paid, the city, there is a condition of approval that's proposed by staff that a financial guarantee be posted for that. So that guarantee would be there. Is that what you're concerned about, or is it more about the timing?
Well, I'm basing it on what's in the material. So can you tell me a bit more about what a financial guarantee entails? What does that mean?
A financial guarantee is something that developers have to pay to the city to ensure things like public improvements and so forth. We also require it for eco passes that are part of the approval. And it's either a letter of credit that is issued to the city that the city can draw on, or it's the funds itself being deposited with the city. It's one of those two things.
So how does the language that's in the proposal about this 18 months after issuance intersect with the financial guarantee?
I'm going to try to find the condition of approval.
Sorry about the cuckoo clock. We lived in Germany when I was 12 years old, and there's a cuckoo. Oh, yeah, okay.
So the condition of approval that staff is recommending states, prior to issuance of a building permit for a new building, the applicant shall submit a financial guarantee in a form acceptable to the Director of Public Works in an amount equal to $200,000, which represents and secures the applicant's funding commitment towards the proposed Gunbarrel shuttle service. So before building permits are issued, the city either has $200,000 or a letter of credit, which is something the city can just call on without having to prove any debt owed. And those are really the only two types of financial guarantees that that the city has been accepting.
So that would address my, am I understanding the legal language correctly? That would address my concern that that money absolutely go towards supporting that shuttle.
Yes, and can you tell me the page number again for the TDM language?
Yeah, so the TDM is page 323 of the entire packet.
And I have it on, it's the page 7 of the attachment F, TDM plan, if that helps.
No, mine says it's page 10 of attachment F. Sorry.
Oh dear.
But it's table 2. It's the Celestial Seasonings PUD TDM plan dash residential, and it's table 2 in attachment F.
Okay, so the way we tried to set it up was that there was a guaranteed payment, but we didn't want it to be an open-ended requirement because it is possible that no shuttle is established. So what to do with the money at that point in time? So we actually worked with the applicant team and asked them to propose a time period that they're willing to commit that money for. And that's where the 18 months after issuance of the last certificate of occupancy came from.
So I'm sorry I just am trying to understand. So, but one of the key elements of the plan are all of these external transportation promises. And I'm trying to ensure that at least one of them comes, the one we have a little bit of control over actually comes to fruition. And is that so that, do you have any recommendations, Hella, about how we do that?
Well, I see that Andy Allison's hand is up. I wonder if he wants to address.
Yeah, that I think that in this case it would be fine to hear from the applicant if you have some additional.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Andy Allison. The 18 months, just to clarify, and maybe there's a way to make this a little easier. 18 months from CO came from the fact that that's usually what it takes us to lease up site. And so we wanted to have a full site up there for when the shuttle was up and running, to give them the most possible people out there to serve. We're happy to move that time frame back, forward, whichever way you want that makes you more comfortable. It's not an issue to us. I think you heard from Andrea today, the chamber, they're going to be ready to roll when they get that money. I don't know how long it takes them to implement everything, but we're not concerned with the timing. Hopefully that 18 months didn't make it more confusing, but the intent was to set it up so when we had the most people moved into the units out there.
That's interesting. So how do my colleagues feel if we were to eliminate the 18-month time frame and it's when the certificate of occupancy is offered? Since there are other people, I mean, the hope is that that shuttle will be used by other people who live in what will become a bigger neighborhood. Are people comfortable with, how do my colleagues feel about that?
And
Thumbs up,
you know,
down?
Yeah, Bill, it sounded like that was something that would be okay as far as you're concerned. So
I only saw a response from John. I don't know if there's.
Can you frame what you're saying exactly, Sarah, again? Because I'm not following it entirely.
I second that.
Okay, so I think the thing I'm trying to make sure happens is that $200,000, which can support the first year of the shuttle, which is this key component of all of these transportation needs for a development that is actually not near public transit at this point, in fact, goes into effect. And I understand what the applicant has said, that it takes 18 months to fully rent up. But it would be great to have that shuttle service operating as soon as, or as quickly after the occupancy certificate is issued, so that there really is public transit for any of the residents as they move in. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 months, but I was just worried that 18 months is a very long time for residents in 230 units to not get in the habit of taking transit if it's available to them.
And if I may speak to that a little bit more, the purpose of the 18 months was to set kind of a deadline for how long does the applicant have to try to establish this shuttle, or if there's not enough funding for it with the $200,000, for how long does he have to try to establish it? It does allow for it to be established earlier, but one of the things we could do is write something in there when it should be established if possible, and then for how long he has to continue to try to meet it.
And I saw Edward's hand go up briefly. Maybe your hand went down. If Hella covered.
Hella pretty much addressed what I wanted to clarify, was that 18-month is not actually the actual timing of the implementation, and the actual implementation is outside of the applicant, and it's a third party. But the reality is, anytime post this approval, up till that point, that's 18 months post the last CO, they would have to provide that contribution to provide that shuttle. So it could start at any point when the chamber or when the partnership decides to start it. Also, just for additional thought on that timeline, post CO is several years beyond still, because we finish this up and then they have to go into their technical document phase, which will take a period of time. They'll go through their building permit phase. By the time we finish both of those, we'll be into 2022, I'm sure, before construction starts. And they're going to have, I'm going to guess, at least 12 months of construction to finish the entirety of the site, which is why it's the last CO. It's probably more than 12 months, depending on how they phase that. So just a clarity of how long that actually is in effect. And it's probably like 3 years total from approval.
Right. So no, I appreciate that, Edward. And I guess what caught my eye was the way the language is written. Provided the shuttle is established no later than 18 months after the issuance of the last certificate of occupancy. The way that reads to me as a non-lawyer is once those 18 months are up, that $200,000 is no longer available to the chamber. Now, that may not be what you meant, but that's how it reads.
No, that is exactly correct. That would be the point when that obligation would expire. And Hella can probably address a little bit. You know, we have to be cautious when we impose any kind of a requirement in terms of when it's used. There are some legalities around that doesn't necessarily allow an open-ended collection, whether it be for a transit system or for other public infrastructure that we may collect. And if we don't implement within a reasonable time frame, we actually have a right to that back, and we have a challenge there. I don't know, Hella, if you want to address that any further or correct anything I've said there.
Yeah, that's correct what Edward said. And it could be longer than, if Edward estimated it might be 3 years. We could go further out than that, but I wouldn't recommend to go beyond 6 or 7 years.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is changing the time frame as the way to guarantee that the funds are available is by changing the time frame. Because it sounds like the applicant is prepared to support this, but that the legal lang and the assumption is that they will, and it won't take 18 months. And I get all that, but there's also this loophole. It's not meant to be a loophole, but there's also this endpoint that could conceivably result in there not being that $200,000 to support. So I guess then the condition is to extend it out past 18 months to, I don't know, 24 months.
Just to clarify what Edward said, though, I'm not following the 18-month time frame, because it sounds like the shuttle is able to start even prior to that 18-month time frame. It sounds like, is that correct, Edward? Can you give us sort of when?
Yes.
Give us a sense of when the shuttle could start and what that time frame could look like, plus the 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, that is correct. The shuttle could start at any point when the partnership is ready for. So, you know, if this approval was to go into effect soon here, and they put everything together and wanted to start the shuttle on January 1st of next year using these dollars, they could. Or it could be the following January 1st. What the condition says is those dollars will be available for that start up till a point that is 18 months past that final certificate of occupancy.
So it's already like I guess the point that's how I was tracking it. It's already like a 3-year time frame for this to be set up.
Correct.
I think that what and you can tell me if I'm correct, Sarah, that we have a history of a few of these kinds of things that have been promised as community benefits with proposals where something changed, you know, like, for example, a movie theater in a building downtown, and that there was no, that the enforceability was weak enough that people were a bit disappointed that that there wasn't a stronger way to hold the developer to that promise. And so I think, Sarah, what you're saying is if 18 months went by and the van service wasn't ready to be launched for any reason, would this be something that could just fall through, and then the public would see that not come to fruition? That's your concern?
That's my concern, especially since if we're really trying to achieve some of these efficiency and transportation proximity things, I just want to make sure that funding is there for the longest period of time, given any contingencies.
Yeah. Okay. The applicant does have a hand up. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, hey, thanks. We're, sorry, I might have been confusing with the 18 months. We're happy to extend it as long as makes you guys happy, to make sure you believe the security is in place for when the shuttle is set up. It's not, we were thinking of the occupancy issue, but we're happy to extend it whatever you guys think makes sense.
Okay, so it sounds like, Sarah, would you be more comfortable with a longer window, so that we, that it wouldn't be so likely that eventuality would happen, that this didn't come to fruition? It sounds to me like there's a pretty optimistic outlook that it would happen quickly, but I don't see any issue with making it 36 months instead of 18 months if we're more comfortable with that.
So before I answer that, Lupita had her hand up, so maybe she has.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Lupita. I'm so sorry. I'm not seeing these things very quickly.
Don't worry, I understand it, but I'm glad, because I think that we're all getting on the same page. I had similar questions. Because it was whether it needed to be shortened or to be lengthened. So I think it's clear that lengthening is what will help us. And I actually had a comment regarding if there's a way that the applicant could, I don't know if this is possible, but given that one of our concerns is to provide services to the present residents of Gunbarrel, whether there will be a way to somehow get feedback or monitor somehow how much a shuttle, this shuttle will be used by the present residents as opposed to the new residents for new development, to determine whether we are in fact providing good community services for our friends in Gunbarrel, which often are, we've said a number of times, are forgotten in some ways, but I think this is one of those places where you can provide something, and if that is even possible.
Okay. Well, I do see both Andrea's hand up, I think, first, and the applicant. So if you want to tag team any observations on that.
The only thing I'll address is Lupita's comment she just made, in that the modeling on the State Highway 119 first and final mile study actually showed for this service area, with the workforce that's concentrated there plus the residents, we're modeling at a higher ridership rate than many successful microtransit systems that have been implemented in national comparisons. So this is a great area to implement something like that based on what we're seeing.
Did you want to add anything, Bill or applicant team?
Yeah, hey, it's Andy again. I just add that it sounded like maybe Lupita's question was about tracking some of that, and we're happy to work with the chamber and VIA to figure out a way to track who is using the shuttle, if that helps. That gets to her question.
So,
great. Lupita, does that help?
Yes. One is, if the models tell us that it is a good place to implement it, that's great news. But also plus implementation to actually get some data to determine whether in fact we're providing a service for this community. We would like to be able to show that and hopefully encourage them to use it in case if it's not being used as much. But definitely this is something that, we think that will be beneficial beyond this one community that is coming in.
Yeah.
So I think for the question that you had asked, David, which is about what is it that, what kind of language would meet the concerns, which are not, that I don't believe the applicant won't. I'm not concerned about the applicant's commitment to this. I'm more concerned about that time frame being a bit of a loophole. So I think the way to change that is to extend the time frame to say 24 months, which is a full 2 years after that certificate of occupancy, which hopefully it will be implemented long before that 2 years goes by. And I guess, Hella, because of the way the language is written, if the applicant were to sell the development halfway through, would the new owner still be responsible for that, those funds?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So do I need to come up with language, or
I think I can draft something for you if you like.
Okay, awesome. So that was one condition. Lupita has her hand up.
Okay, yes, Lupita.
Thank you. Just following up, because the applicant just mentioned that they will be willing to go even farther than 24 months. So Sarah, you might want to think a little bit whether you're asking for them a modest increase from 18 months to 24. That's only 6 months more. I mean, would it be a little bit? Would you feel more comfortable if you just extend it to 3 years or something? Given that the applicant is happy to do it. So, and if Hella thinks is appropriate, what you want to do is to give, the space to make sure that this happens, and the applicant doesn't seem to have any issues with the time frame. I think that, just in sense, just to give you more flexibility. That would be just my comment.
So I'm comfortable with that, and I just sort of David, can I ask for sort of a straw poll from everybody else if they're comfortable with that 3-year time frame?
Sure. As chair, I'll even pass on your asking for the straw poll. I'm not sure I'll be able to count the thumbs ups, so maybe Sarah and Peter can help me with the visual. I'll give a thumbs up on 36 month if that
so
is.
I think everybody's fine with that.
Right.
Yeah, we got all the thumbs we have.
Got all the thumbs.
One each.
All right. Well, that was good.
And I have one other condition that has to do with circulation, which is more focuses on the H2D5, where practical and beneficial, a significant shift away from single occupancy vehicles use to alternative modes is promoted through the use of TDM techniques. And I know we have a requirement that eco passes be offered for 3 years or provided for up to 3 years, but because this is a rental property and those turn over, I am wondering if there's some way to guarantee eco passes to residents over a longer period of time. So if there's turnover every year and we enter the 4th year and there's turnover, the folks who are there the 4th year or the 5th year or the 6th year also get eco passes, because we are depending on all of this infrastructure to address the lack of proximity, to try to get people out of their cars. And I'm just curious if that's something we can think about. And Hella, I'm starting looking at you, because you can tell me if it's even legally possible to consider this.
You want to require eco passes to be provided for a longer period of time as part of the approval? And what does it require right now per the TD?
It's 3 years. It's I don't have it right in front of me. Hold on, but it's the first 3 years, which I think is sort of the boilerplate that the city requires.
Yes, I think you could require a longer time period for that.
Then I'd very much like to. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, and that was actually an interesting thing that I think we said last week, is that it would be interesting at some point if staff has the ability to tell us. We know that these 3-year agreements are standard. We should be getting to the point where we can find out if developments tend to extend those beyond the requirement. And it would be interesting to know, because residents get used to it, and it's something that becomes an amenity that is kind of expected at that location. So I think the reason the city has said 3 years is with the hopes that it just continues, right? So it'd be really interesting for us someday to just get a little data on whether those are sticking beyond the required 3 years. But I just said that as an aside. So if 5 years is something that we could consider, Sarah, that I don't know if there would be an objection from the applicant on that. It would be an unusually long period. We usually go with 3 years, but what do other people think?
Lupita has her hand up.
Lupita.
So two possibilities. Yeah, I agree with David that maybe going from 3 to 5 may be something that maybe a little bit extreme, maybe 3 to 4. But again, I haven't heard what the applicant had to say about that. But the other one was in the concern because of the how Sarah prefaced it with, I agree that in rental homes, people tend to have and often a turnover, and we don't know how often these people will rent for. But if the eco passes are for 3 years, but once somebody moves out, let's say after the first year, if that eco pass gets removed from the circulation or it gets offered to the next person that takes that apartment, I'm not clear on that. So if that can be explained a little bit how that works, that will help me. But certainly, I think lengthening a little bit, that will be something I will support, and I would like to hear my colleagues about that idea.
So I don't know if there's a hand up. I can certainly weigh in, having worked with corporations and neighborhoods who have set up EcoPass systems. And, generally those EcoPasses expire every year unless they're proactively renewed by the organization that that is sponsoring the EcoPass program. So every year, for example, when I worked for Cisco Systems, they would renew our EcoPasses if we're still employed, and if we left the company, they wouldn't be renewed. I don't know if they actually expire them early if you leave in the middle of the year, how that works. And certainly new employees get new EcoPasses. I'll let anybody who has more information let us know if that works similarly with residences. But I would assume new people that would move in would just be eligible for those EcoPasses during the 3-year period.
Who is that? Edward, who would know the answer to those questions about how areas magically appears?
The fun of Zoom, echoing what David said, I believe is true for both the commercial and also the neighborhood eco passes, which this is part of. So as people move in, they would be eligible, and as people move out, their eligibility would expire. The intent behind the TDM plan here and the condition is that anybody who is a current resident in the development would have access to an eco pass.
And is there, Edward, is there any sort of precedent for some of these larger rental developments that are being built for longer than 3-year requirements to the owners of the rental properties to provide?
I'm not aware on the rental side of ones we've done longer. I think there have been a handful of projects over the years that may have been more on the mixed use or commercial that had something longer than 3 years. I think there may be a few at 5. Part of it is being cautious about the administrative burden to continue to put that in play, and also just how much we are collecting in that financial guarantee upfront and the implications of that. So that, there is the opportunity for it, again, being thoughtful about what is the right number of years for those pieces.
Do you have a recommendation of what the right number of years would be or could be?
My recommendation wouldn't be to go beyond the 5. Most of them being at 3. I think 2 more years can provide that stability. From anecdotally, I think what we see is that many places after 3 years, they do continue. It's become an expected part of a development, whether it's a neighborhood or a commercial or multi-family. And so, going up to 5 could reinforce that. I wouldn't suggest going longer than that necessarily in terms of what that upfront cost, the administrative burden to do it versus what the additional benefit would be.
Well, the addition, okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. To me, the additional benefit, the question sort of left unanswered by Edward, is that we are trying to achieve these circulation and TDM goals. And this is not just, it is not currently proximate to much in the way of public transportation, but perhaps it will be more appealing to use public transportation for renters if they have a eco pass. So I don't know how my colleagues feel about this, but I would recommend, I'd like to put out there the idea of a condition that says applicant or owner of development shall be required to provide eco passes to all residents, this requirement shall cover any resident who signs a lease during the first 5 years of the development's operations. I'm seeing.
Does anyone have any concerns about such a condition?
No, we got that.
I got thumbs up. Ed, help. Thank you, Ed.
So George had a thumbs up. John had a thumbs up. Lupita and I and Peter. And oh, okay. So thumbs up. Excellent. Those were my two.
I think that sounds fine if we don't hear that it's of huge concern. I think it's a nice wording to say provided to people who sign leases during those 5 years too, because that kind of alleviates a little bit of maybe of an uncertainty if you had that. So thank you.
Okay. All right, those were the two things I wanted to put on the table.
All right. Excellent. I certainly we can do more discussion of potential conditions if people have some other ideas. We could always put forth a motion when we're ready. I don't know how.
John has his hand up, and so did John, and George.
Thank you.
And George.
John and Georgie. Okay, so John, you go first. And sorry,
okay.
I can't see you.
Thank you. I have two suggestions for conditions. One is, and I'm not even sure this is necessary, it may be implied, but one is that there be no gates or fences that keep people out of the areas intended for common use, except for the swimming pool, which we discussed last time. But the applicant has indicated that there would be open access to the various parks in the project. But in the past, there's been a couple of projects where we heard sentiments like that, but then fences appeared later on to keep out the public. And so I'd like that to be a condition, that no fences be erected to keep out the public from those areas which the applicant has committed to make available to the public. And then the second is, I would just like to get the reaction of my colleagues regards the area to the west of this project, which is still owned by Celestial Seasonings and Hain. For which the PUD indicated there would be ball fields and parking built. But right now we are very unclear about the significance or meaning of those obligations. And so my suggested condition would be that as a condition of approval here, that land continue to be left without buildings. So I just want to get the feel. David has made his thoughts known already, but I don't know how my other colleagues.
I'll chime in. I think actually the fence proposal makes a tremendous amount of sense, and I think I'm fully supportive of that. This feels to me like it was a pretty good trade-off for the land that they had, and I'm not convinced that imposing that on the vacant land is in our best interest in the future. And I would prefer not to codify that and have, if there is something that comes up, have the planning board and the city deliberated on it then. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Georgie. Anybody else have their hand up at this point?
I second both points that Georgie made. That I like John's John emphasizing the openness again, but then I don't think it serves our purposes now. I know where he's going with it, but I think that it would be a precedent, and I think we can handle this going forward. I know this board certainly can when and if we see something on this site again.
And if there aren't other hands up, I'll just say that on the first issue, I'm not sure I commented, John, and I will say that I like the idea of, if we can do it, of asking that no fences and no trespassing signs go up around the open part of the site, because I have also been very disappointed when I have seen such things go up when it wasn't clear in the site reviews. So, oh, and Lupita has her hand up. I've just been notified. Lupita?
Yeah. Yes, I agree about the fence. I think that's that's an easy one to agree with, and hopefully we'll continue to make it clear all of these open spaces are meant to be open to everyone, and so just kind of eventually the message will come across loud and clear, and we won't have to repeat this. But thank you, John, for always reminding us. It's a very important point. The second part, I do agree with Georgie. I more so that we do not at least I don't know that I could anticipate what can come up that may be another potential better use. I don't know. And given the potential changes are going to be in the future of our city, I would like not to restrict future boards on how they can approve or disapprove a project in this site. So I don't know, because the way I see it, the exchanges that happened on this one particular case, I thought that was beneficial for the city. And so I would like to give future boards the flexibility and the freedom to be able to make their own decisions. And if it so happens that they believe that keeping this as an open space, or there will be other needs, or maybe we get to the point where prairie dogs need to be there, then they will be able to make that decision. So that's kind of like what I am on those two suggestions.
Okay, and let's, I think Hella has her hand up, so if we could hear from our attorney.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the fence condition. I think that's legally supportable. With regard to no trespassing signs, I would be careful. You cannot require that the property be open to the public, because that's one of the rights of a private property owner, that he can exclude people he doesn't want there. And requiring that no trespassing signs go up is not quite that, but it is something that sometimes helps property owners in cases where somebody might start to live on the property in hidden corners and so forth. That is typically how that kind of stuff is enforced. And again, it is property owners' right to exclude people. And we cannot require that it be open to the public and anybody have access.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I certainly have a negative reaction to no trespassing signs, I must admit. Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the second of John's suggestions, and I wonder if rather than putting limits on what could be built, would instead be to making a request to the landowner to maintain the open prairie natural ecosystem of the land that's currently there until such time as they come up with some other alternative use based on what our zoning, our land use code and zoning allows for, so that it doesn't become the parking lot for the delivery trucks, which currently park themselves on Red Zinger Avenue, I think, because it would be nice to have that. I know that for the neighbors who already live there, that whole area has been it's not officially open space, capital O, capital S, but it has been used as local small o, small s open space. And it would be nice if it was maintained that way, at least for the time being.
And I saw Hella with her hand up, but I wasn't sure if that was a vestige of the past thing.
Forgotten to take it.
Yeah, does anyone else, does anyone have a comment on that? I don't know, how that gets done. A parking lot would require a use review, wouldn't it? If it's just put on a vacant piece of property in any zone, I think, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Are we just talking about the area of the ball fields in the, I think it's the southwest corner of the property?
Well, the area to the west of the project we're dealing with tonight. It's the area that's part of the PUD, and between this project and the diagonal highway.
Oh, I think that area is actually subject to an open space easement, I believe.
It is?
Yes, let me confirm that with staff.
I thought the open space easement was a small strip along the highway itself, rather than the whole area between our project and that little open space easement.
It is an area along the diagonal highway. I think all along the property on the property. Is that the area you're talking about?
Yes, but that's a narrow strip. It's not covering the entire area between this project and the highway.
I think I may need some time to look with staff for that easement and tell you exactly how wide it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, even so, I still remain, and I don't know how others feel. We can do a straw poll on how people are feeling, but I remain less than comfortable with kind of almost doing some sort of off-the-cuff rezoning of this property without the proper legislative procedures to do that. So, I personally would prefer to stay away from that condition.
I agree. I think it's overreaching and not appropriate here, and I vote that we move on. We vote to either continue this discussion or we move on from it.
Do we want to take a straw poll on whether we should continue discussion on this or just move on? Who wants to go ahead and move forward at this point?
So we have a condition. We have the first condition, which is the fence, and everybody seems to be in support of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then there's the second condition, which has to do with putting limitations on the use of the undeveloped land to the west. And there sounds like there is not support, majority support for that. Is that correct?
That's what I'm hearing. I think that I've heard support from John and a little bit of support from you, but I feel like the rest of the board members are not really interested in going down that path unless I hear otherwise.
Okay, I have to say that's my perception also. So I suppose I won't be making any motion in that respect.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. It's so funny. Your faces are all frozen, so I think you're all displaying the exact same emotions.
George has his hand up too.
Yeah, if we're done with that issue, I did hear the developer say in their initial presentation, and then again tonight, and it seems like there might be a disconnect between what the library has heard, or at least is what they're anticipating, versus what is actually available to them. So I don't know if it's already codified, but if it's not, I think the two uses of the coffee shop and the library, the developer had clearly stated that those were zero rent or $1 rent for each one of those in perpetuity. And I just want to make sure that that's codified somewhere, so that if those uses can 5 or 10 years from now, that someone doesn't try to monetize those space differently, if that's really a community benefit for for this development and the overall neighborhood. Yeah,
Hella, do we have the ability to to enforce that. I know it's kind of outside the bounds of our community benefits in the code.
Yeah, we can't require that the library be provided there over a long period of time. And I missed the entire comment that Georgie made.
Yeah, so let me restate it. It's the library and the coffee shop were both presented by the developer as no cost spaces beyond obviously the CAM and the pass-throughs and the expenses, but from a rent perspective, they were $0 or $1. So however those spaces evolve, that has been put into this project as a community benefit, both for the development and for the neighborhood. And so the question is, how do we codify that? I understand the library only wants to do a 3 to 5 year lease. I would assume that they would have in their lease, perpetual options to renew at that $0 or $1. But if they choose not to, the question is, how do we maintain that? Kind of like the commercial community benefit that we had talked about. How do we maintain what the developer's intent is so that 10 years from now, when this project changes hands and the library vacates, and that could become an art space or some space for some other community venue, how do we make sure that that space remains not monetized like that?
Yeah, I know that that's part of what the applicant has presented. From a legal perspective, I don't think that's something that we can require or enforce, because it is requiring to provide space for free and give somebody these. I think it could be considered a taking.
Yeah, I've seen similar things in the past where applicants have offered up a permanently affordable covenant on a piece, during the process of coming before the boards and the city council call-ups, but I don't know that. I don't think that we can necessarily.
That confuses me because the whole point of the commercial community benefit that we discussed was a perpetual right. So what's different about something like this versus what we were trying to codify with the community benefit number 2? Well,
in that case, for community benefit, it was as a bonus in exchange for a bonus to build additional height. And also we were talking about creating a criterion that would directly address that. So I don't think we have a criterion under which that could be.
Well, but I guess my point is, if the developers will, I'm not saying we require it. I'm saying if the developer is willing to offer that and codify, which I heard he was, why can't we?
Actually, okay. Project? I think that's the question, Georgie. Thank you. Let's go ahead and ask the applicant that very question, because I think that.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes, absolutely. I don't know how we do that for you. We're happy to do that however it works, but that is the intent. Those spaces, no matter who is using them, will be that free rent or dollar rent, whatever it is, for ever.
And what we did in the case that I'm thinking of, recent case, is that I know that it came up at planning board to ask for such a covenant, and then when it got called up by council, it actually was offered in words, and I would have trouble wording it legally, but it is nice to have that if the applicant is willing to do it. Like Hella says, we can't necessarily require it, but it's really great if we know that it is there. Hella, did we do? Yeah, go ahead.
Only impose a condition of approval if without that condition it doesn't meet the review criteria. So you have to identify what criteria haven't been met without that, and then draft around.
In the case of the, I'll just go ahead and can we discuss the fact that in the Macy's case they actually did volunteer to put the affordable covenants on the commercially affordable space. Was that something that did not go in language in the approval, but was just offered up by the applicant? Hella, do you know?
It was just offered up by the applicant. There was eventually a condition drafted, but our office expressed serious legal concerns about it. And that's what I'm doing again.
Well, I guess if we can't draft it up as a condition of approval, if we've got their if we've got their commitment, which sounds like we do, is that still something that can be codified in the project without being a condition?
Well, I think you would have to record it as a condition at this point in time because it's not part of the plans.
But the developer is willing to do it as part of the plans.
Then I still have a problem with what criterion is not met without that requirement.
Yeah, we are kind of going for something that we want in a condition without necessarily having the specific criteria to do it.
Lupita has her hand up.
Lupita?
Could this be something where we just going to bring up the community benefit as being a key element, not only for this community, but for the entire, nearby community, that this provides, I don't know, in perpetuity, if that's how they're willing to go for it, that community benefit is integral to this project, and maybe can morph into different type of groups that use the space, but that is really part of the requirement that this be preserved. Could that be, because it is somewhat of a condition, but it's not necessarily too limiting, because I will think that it gives them an opportunity to, shift every 3 years or every 5 years, a different group will be there. If the library does not want to stay longer, I will think a library there will be a perfect thing for much longer than 5 years. But if that is not possible, there are other community benefits that can contribute to this area.
Well, generally, you're only allowed to require that services be provided to the public to the extent that the development creates impact, not to create a greater good for the public that the community as a whole should be paying for. So that's the constitutional limitation that exists.
Yeah.
Could it be something to, like something like the library, prevents some people from having to go into downtown to use library sources, and then if it maybe has a different an impact on potentially transportation. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, I think it just would not be roughly proportional. It would first have to address the impacts. Whatever you require would have to address the impacts that the development is creating. So if additional traffic is created, then maybe we need a wider sidewalk than was there before. So there has to be a nexus between the impact that's created and the requirement that you're imposing to address it. And then the requirement has to be roughly proportional in nature and extent to the impact that you're creating. And the purpose behind it is that the development has to pay its own way, but development should not be required to cover costs that are really something, a need that's created by the larger community for a library in that area.
So I have another way of asking this question. Is there a way then that the developer can impose this condition on themselves without us imposing it? We've heard that he would like to do that. We know that it's a benefit for the community. I think it would signal a lot of goodwill to the community that this is not going to be something that gets monetized and changed 10 years from now, similar to the fence thing, right? So can the developer record something on their own without this being a condition that would codify that, if they're willing to do so?
Yes.
Yes. So maybe there's not something we can do here. I know that I'm supportive of this project because of those elements. And I heard some community support, from people that were wavering on this project before. That to me is something that pushes things over the edge. It's really good for the city. So I would love to hear from the applicant again, if they intend to do that in order to allay concerns of the community that down the road this could be changed.
Great. Okay, Leah, let's hear from the applicant on that, and then maybe we can figure out a way forward.
We're happy to do some type of voluntary covenant if that gets it done. I think that's something similar they did at Macy's. I'm not sure, but we're committed to do that, and so whatever it takes to show that, we can do.
So I'm wondering if I realize that we're trying to keep planning board within the guardrails with regards to this. If we were to, I don't know if in our site review approvals, we sometimes add language to the motion that says, furthermore, the board understands that the applicant intends to put permanently affordable covenants on the affordable commercial spaces. I don't know if we call them commercial, but non-residential spaces, and the board appreciates that the applicant is doing this voluntarily. So it becomes in the public record that we heard that, but not a condition. I mean, I don't know. Anybody? I can't see hands.
I'm supportive of that.
David, I like where you're going with that.
So Hella, I don't know if that's considered doable. I love the fact that we just heard that is something that the applicant is willing to do and intends to do, and I think it's fantastic. So if we just had a public acknowledgement of that, I mean, certainly this is an open meeting, we're acknowledging it now, but maybe having a nod to that in the motion without making it necessarily a condition would be interesting.
I think it.
I'm not hearing you, Helen.
Oh, yeah, I think you can do that.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, with that, I think that we should probably take a break. I've let it go too long between breaks. Helen, have you been able to draft a little language? And if so, maybe you could, we could just display it when we come back.
Yeah, and I have the condition for the changes, for the change to the TDM plan with regard to the shuttle. And I think that was for 3 years following certificate of occupancy. Is that right? And then I wasn't able to draft anything in addition, but were there conditions intended for longer? There's something about the
Yeah,
I think
5
the
years.
EcoPass for 5 years.
EcoPass for 5 years. I've closed out my document, but it basically said that the applicant or owner will provide an EcoPass to any new leasee for 5 years. On the something about it being, maybe it wasn't on the lease, but anytime someone signs a new lease up to for the first 5 years of the project, so that it covers that turnover.
Right. And then the other one was that there be no fence erected around the open space areas, common open space areas. So why don't we go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back let's go. It's been a while since we've had a break, so let's go ahead and take a full 12-minute break. We'll come back on the hour and see if we can have some language for a motion with these conditions. right, we're at the hour. I can't see who has turned on their video yet, necessarily. Oh, there's John. There's Peter, Sarah. So I went ahead and I had typed up some language for the conditions that we were considering, and I've sent those to Hella. And so we certainly have the recommended motion, and I guess we'll just be adding whoever wants to make the motion conditions that we discussed. Are Lupita and Georgie back with us? There's Lupita. It's getting late in Puerto Rico. And if someone can just acknowledge when Georgie is back. Hello, were you able to, I don't know if the text I sent you was.
Oh, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry, I didn't realize you didn't see me.
Great. Yeah, it's a little hard for me. Thanks for all your cooperation on this, folks. I think it shows how cooperative people are on this board, that we couldn't really follow the normal procedures, but everybody was quite good at taking turns. Thank you for that. Helen, when you're ready, I mean, I certainly have the language I put together, but it's kind of maybe not as precise as you would be able to fine-tune it for us. So we could certainly display a potential motion that somebody might want to make when you're ready.
I'm terrible at sharing my screen on Zoom, but I'll do.
Yeah, and I certainly.
Oh, I can.
You want to send it to me, Hella?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Cindy can certainly do it for us. Thank you. I would offer, but I'm just afraid with my internet connection that it would be another glitch in our meeting here. What I I can read what I wrote down as just kind of prose before that comes up. What I heard was, and we're going to say something like, the time frame for implementation of the local shuttle service be increased from 18 to 36 months. And I'm not sure if that's a deadline. It's probably phrased as a deadline. The EcoPass program shall be extended to 5 years with passes provided to all tenants signing new leases within this time frame. There shall be no fence erected around the shared open space areas between the structures on the site. And additionally, the board acknowledges the intent of the applicant to apply covenants to the affordable non-residential spaces on the site to assure that they are available for low rent uses in perpetuity. Those are the 4 areas that I had written down. Does that sound right? Did I miss anything?
No, that sounds right.
Great.
Not sure that language is perfect, but those were the areas, yeah.
I just got it from Hella.
Yeah, the language isn't perfect, but it can help us cross-reference to make sure that at least our thoughts were captured.
Everyone see that okay? Do you need it larger, smaller?
For me, it's perfect.
Let me know where you want to begin.
And I can speak a little bit to what I did. I went into the TDM plan, and there were actually business eco passes and neighborhood eco passes. So I included both of them here. I think you were only talking about residents. So that's maybe something for the board to talk about and whether that is your intent or not. In B, and actually these are, Cindy, maybe you can write with the following modifications to the recommended site review conditions of approval at the very top. This relates to the review conditions.
I'm sorry, again, Hella, I'm sorry.
With the following modification to the recommended site review conditions of approval. Condition 5 is the financial guarantee for the eco passes. And since you're going to 5 years, I assumed that you wanted the financial guarantee to also cover 5 years. So that is what the proposed change in capital B would do. And then C is actually what's then written in D, so you could delete D. No fences shall be constructed around the shared open space area shown on the approved plans. And I think it would be good to clarify a little bit more what open space areas you're talking about. I know that the applicant is planning on having a fence around the pool. I think that may be a requirement under the building code. So it would be good to be clear about that.
Yeah, this is John here. I think I was hoping to say something about no fences shall be constructed around the, except for the pool, around the shared open spaces that would exclude the public from those spaces, that would prevent public access to those spaces.
Probably want to move shown on the approved plans to after open space areas, and before that would, yeah.
And you might want to word it differently than public access, and that's not something we can require, and that seems to indicate that public access is required. Maybe we could have, we could refer to residents, employees, and visitors to the property.
Couldn't we just say access then? That would prevent access to the open space?
Yes, I think that would be fine as well.
Where did you want to put this, David?
I think after the word areas, so around the shared open space areas shown on the approved plans. Yeah, exactly. And then it should say that instead of the. And I think just a nit where it says in B, condition 5, it should say site review condition 5, because there's also a 5 under use review conditions. So just to be clear. And then the new condition 7 would be, I suppose, a site review condition 7.
Yeah, and then you can delete that space and D.
There's a space?
E is C, essentially.
Oh, okay.
No, keep that. Just eliminate the space there and then D, yeah.
There we go. And I suppose since we're doing this, even under A, it should say a new site condition 3J.
Do we need this?
Thanks for the excellent drafting, Hella.
Do we need years? I put that in there, but I don't know if we need it.
It's fine to have it, I think.
I'm sorry, Hell, I couldn't hear you.
I think it's good to add years.
Okay.
And can I dictate the prose at the end once we're kind of done with this after, at the very end of this.
And 200,000, not $200 with an extra zero.
There we go.
Thanks for catching.
Go ahead.
Thanks for catching that. That's different in German. In German, I always mess it up.
Oh yeah, the loophole.
Put a euro sign in front of it. Cindy, if you could, after C, create a new paragraph all the way out at the least indent level, because it won't be part of this list. Yeah. And it should say, here's what I came up with. Additionally, the board acknowledges the intent of the applicant to apply covenants to the affordable non-residential spaces.
Is that what you said?
I said to the affordable non-residential.
Say commercial.
I wanted to just say non-residential, because the library may not really be commercial. On the site, to assure that they are available for low rent uses in perpetuity.
I don't know how to spell that.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go. We could even say acknowledges and appreciates. We want to.
Why don't we say the commitment of the applicant?
That sounds fine to me.
If you could clarify, is this something that you consider a requirement of this approval?
Didn't you tell us we couldn't require it?
Yes.
I thought we couldn't really require it, so we're just acknowledging it to make a public record that we heard this.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think about, because that is what I recommended and said. I just want it to be interpreted the right way.
We could say additionally, though not a condition for approval, comma, the board. We're being creative tonight. Should say a condition instead of at condition. Do we like acknowledges and appreciates, or do you just like acknowledges?
I think acknowledges fine.
Yeah, let's be a little more
That's fine.
terse and just binary.
So
acknowledging it, period.
Yeah, that's fine. So so Cindy, just the fourth word should be not a condition, not of condition. Yeah. So that changed the of to an a. Yeah.
Do you want to clarify? I'm just reading this here. Additional non-residential spaces to the site to assure that they are available for the benefit of the community. Without a base rent charge, in perpetuity and take out low rent uses.
Yeah, I wasn't sure of that wording, so thank you, Georgie. I think that's more appropriate.
And maybe just to clarify what these two spaces are, right? I mean, they are outlined in the plan as non-residential uses, that they are available to the benefit of the affordable non-residential spaces. Maybe parentheses, currently earmarked for the cafe and library annex. Oh no, you can insert that. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Cindy, after the existing text above that says affordable non-residential spaces.
Yeah, and just put in parentheses, currently earmarked for the cafe and library annex. Or currently planned for the cafe. Earmark's probably not the right word, planned.
And I think, Hella, your hand is up on my screen, but you can always just jump in, of course.
Yeah, I was going to propose that you check in with the applicant team one more time, if they have any comments about the proposed conditions.
Yeah, do you, I'd love to hear from the applicant your response to this wording, if you think it captures what your intent is.
Yep, just to reassure the board, we're comfortable with all of the verbiage and intent as shown in these conditions. So thanks for asking.
Great. All right. Well, if certainly as we make the motion, sometimes we come up with wording issues. I'd be glad to do that on behalf of the board if people would like me to. So I would move that this is a motion to approve site review case number LUR 2020-00063, incorporating the staff memorandum and the attached site review criteria checklist and use review criteria checklist as findings of fact and subject to the conditions of approval recommended in the staff memorandum, with the following modifications. A new site review condition 3J shall be added to read a final TDM plan that is revised to require, 1, that the applicant will contribute $200,000 to fund a first year of a Gunbarrel shuttle, provided the shuttle is established no later than 3 years instead of 18 months after issuance of the last certificate of occupancy before the development, and that the applicant provide B-Eco and N-Eco passes or a city-approved equivalent and pay the cost of providing these passes to employees and residents, including all new tenants, for a period of 5 years instead of 3 years following issuance of a certificate of occupancy for each dwelling unit. Second, that the revised site review condition 5 by replacing 3 with 5 years. Third, add a new site review condition 7 to read, no fences shall be constructed with the exception of the pool area around the shared open space areas shown on the approved plans that would prevent access to the open spaces. Additionally, though not a condition for approval, the board acknowledges the commitment of the applicant to apply covenants, the affordable non-residential spaces currently planned for the cafe and library spaces on this site to assure that they are available for the benefit of the community without a base rent charge in perpetuity. I think it should say to apply covenants on or to the affordable. Let's see, is it on? Is on the right word there? Yeah. So I've made this motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Georgie. Any discussion on this motion before we put it up for a vote? I am not seeing any hands for discussion at this point. So given that there is no...
You got one hand. You may have just had Sarah's hand.
Sorry, I'm looking at the, our, the requirements, and they don't actually, anyways, it's fine. They don't seem to track exactly with the letters in the existing, the conditions that staff put forward, but I think you guys have gone through it. So I just must be misreading it. I apologize.
I do have one question, which is what you brought up at the very beginning of this, David, and it's not necessarily related to this, but I just want to put it out there in case there's some wording that we want to put in here, which is around, what I heard loud and clear during all of the hearing last week from the community that was opposed to this, or the neighbors around here, was their desperate desire for a sub-community plan process. And to your point and credit, right? We don't have the authority to go ahead and impose that. But and I know that was put up to council as a priority of this planning board before I was here. But the question is there a way to reinforce that to council, to raise it as an issue that the community brought up during this process, so that they're heard properly, so that this can be something that can be prioritized for them, as it relates to also to John's concerns about the additional land and other things happening in these areas. I don't know whether it belongs here or a separate thing, but I just wanted to raise that for people that might have more experience than I around writing these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll certainly, from the time I've been on planning board, I have seen us, we make recommendations to council in the yearly letter, which is that we used in the retreat to set the work plan for the following year. So that's the most advantageous time to really influence the work plan, I think. So I guess I don't know if certainly we I think we have the authority to send the council our observations throughout the year as well as we see appropriate. But I don't know if people feel that that's needed at this point. So anybody feel free to offer their. I would think it would be a separate motion though if we did do that.
Yeah, that was part of my question, whether or not we want to make it a separate motion or a separate discussion topic. If we want to separate it and that makes sense, I'm fine seconding this and moving this forward.
Great. Yeah, let's address that in a potential second motion. If
John
since it
has
is
his hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Has his hand up. Sorry.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I agree that this should be a separate motion. And when we take a vote, I'll also be making a little statement. And I think that, George, I think that council will be aware of our concern on this, because I think it's quite likely that they'll consider calling it up. And so they'll have a chance to hear some of our thoughts on the need for community plan, sub-community plan then too.
Oh, yes. And thank you, John. I'll also mention that I've watched the city council call up of this concept review and have heard council members also say that this was a high priority to them. So that I know that was discussed certainly at concept review time and may have been discussed since, but thank you, John. So with that, I think we let's go ahead and I think we have a motion in front of us. I would restate the motion, but since it is displayed on the screen and it really involves a certain amount of time to reread it, if people are comfortable, I'll just say that what you see on the screen is a restating of the motion. And with that, I'll go ahead and do a roll call. Peter.
Aye.
Lupita. I think you're muted, Lupita.
She's looking.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
It takes time for the electricity to get to Puerto Rico and back. John.
Aye.
Georgie.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
And I will also vote aye. Yes, anyone have any comments on their votes before we move on to potential additional discussion or motions? Okay. John, I thought you may have said.
John's hands up.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I either I make my comment here or at some point, but I'll make it here. And that is that I'm supporting this. I voted in favor of the motions and I'll be supporting the final vote as well. But I want to go on record as showing my concerns about how the significance of the land use maps in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan seems to be diminishing. And the reason I say that is because after having worked on 2 Boulder Valley Comp Plans as a county planning commissioner, and then on 2 of them subsequently on planning board, the amount of effort that goes into designating the land use is significant. There's a lot of thought. And this change to allow additional residential use of land that is intended for industrial development, I think in the long run is something that we will regret. And I would encourage the council to reconsider its attitude towards the use of industrial land for residential purposes.
Maybe
Thanks.
if we're sending some motion, if we're sending some things to council specific to reminding them of our interest in area planning and Gunbarrel, maybe we can remind them of our interest last year in amending 2.21 to cover all industrial zones.
Did we have a consensus on that?
Yeah, if you remember, David, it was back when Harmon was chair, and it was actually Harmon's idea. So the fact that I wrote it down, because we were trying to, and we sent it off to council. I don't know if the vote was 7-0 or 5-2, but it was, and then Charles is hopefully here. So I think he might know why council ended up not deciding to take it up.
Yeah, I did not research that historical thing. At this point, my feeling is I understand the concern, and I know we've talked about it in the past, but I also have expressed the desire to analyze whether we really think that this negative scenarios are starting to occur or are going to occur by actually getting hard data on the demand for these industrial spaces and how well that demand is being served by the current zoning and with the changes to allow some residential. So I just don't feel like I wouldn't feel comfortable pushing that aspect of this. I am very warm to the idea of reiterating our support for an area plan. Feels they want to vote on that. I think that's fine. We've done that before, but I don't know what
we could send them a motion reference, whatever the right terminology would be, to council that we would like them to prioritize citywide discussion about protecting industrial land, industrial zones, and then it hits your sweet spot of needing more information. without
Yeah,
taking a
I mean,
position on.
Can we flip it and say that we're emphasizing the need for more data and metrics, because then that allows for then a discussion based on knowledge instead of going in with, we may learn something that our assumption was off. I'm not saying we would, but if we say we want more data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I would be looking for, and I think that I also think that we are making huge strides in that with the East Boulder subcommunity plan, because so much of our industrial does fit in there, and with that area plan, we're actually looking at adjusting land use and zoning to match the outcomes. And the zoning exercise hasn't happened yet, so I'm really hoping we see some creative zoning designations that will both protect existing industrial opportunities, and that's what the area plan articulates, but adds some other multi-use and residential opportunities in those areas as well, without hopefully impacting the industrial. So, that's the kind of informed public discussion and analysis with data that I would be looking for. And I feel like the East Boulder area plan does so much of that I'm, that's why I'm kind of wondering if this is the time
maybe one way we can do it, David, is if we're going to write up something to council recommending or reminding them that we would like to prioritize an Gunbarrel subcommunity plan, that a key component of that is the right balance of industrial and residential, and trying, kind of do it that way.
I would be comfortable with adding language like that if people are warm to doing a recommendation to council, because that would be very much in line with what we were looking at tonight with Gunbarrel, and I would support that being part of a subcommunity plan for sure. Mm-hmm. Other people? Sorry, I hope I'm not dominating. I just don't see people's hands going up.
There, thumbs up from George and Lupita and Peter. John, thumbs up. And John and Sarah.
Great. Georgie, have you thought of motion language that might be good to put forward?
I'll leave that to you pros. You've been here longer than I have.
Well, is it a motion or is it a recommendation?
It's a recommendation. I think it's a motion to recommend to council something. So.
Okay, so a motion.
Bring your own motion.
You what, Peter?
Bring your own motion, party. Go for it, Sarah.
How about something like a motion to recommend to council that Gunbarrel be a top priority for area planning, subcommunity planning, and or period, and that as part of that subcommunity planning is some identification of data on loss of or protection of all industrial zones. I know John, we have all talked about the protecting industrial zones. We talked about it at our retreat. We've talked about it when Harmon was chair. We talked about it when Brian was chair. We've talked about this, and I'm sure it happened long before that as well. And that's why Harmon had made that recommendation last year that we try to expand 2.21 to cover all industrial zones. But so this isn't just about the industrial zones in Gunbarrel, but.
Well, I think that I just felt like that we're sending a message to council to reinforce what we've done in the past, our recommendations in the past for sub-community planning, and since we have been focusing on Gunbarrel, that we wanted to add that for this particular thing. It doesn't mean that we're not. I mean, with the East Boulders area sub-community planning, we're also doing that, right? So.
Well, the problem with the East Boulder efforts is that they don't consider the city as a whole. So the information on areas outside of the East Boulder sub-community plan is not being evaluated.
Cindy, thank you for doing this. I was starting to do it myself, but you're capturing it for all to see.
Tracking what Sarah was saying and bringing this more into conformity with our intent, this should be two sentences separated, because I believe that what we're saying is we're emphasizing again the need for data on industrial.
Maybe we can just do it this way. Data that would, I mean, and there's sort of it's a motion with two components. One is on the Gunbarrel being a top priority for sub-community planning, and the second being that the city develop in an effort to protect industrial zones, that the city conduct the kind of research to conduct research on the, no, wait a minute, that the city, in consideration of the possibility of expanding 2.2 Boulder Valley Comp Plan Goal 2.21 to cover all industrial zones, that the city undertake some research to understand what the implications of the current language has been on industrial zone loss and residential development. And then then it's at least the data, we're explaining why we want the data. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think that's fine. But I have to say, I'm wondering if we're talking about this, but it's actually not part of our consideration of this project. Should we formally vote to move the project ahead and then talk about this afterwards?
Well, we voted on the project already.
Oh, we voted on the we voted on the motion.
Right, not
board.
Yeah.
Sorry?
We only voted on the motions so far, I think.
Yeah, and the motion was to approve the site and use review. It was the recommended motion with the conditions that we put together.
All right, so we've completed that. Okay.
Yeah, we should be good to go with that. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
So I have a thought, which is that we do the one motion on the Gunbarrel thing, get rid of the second sentence, and come back. And when we come back after our break, I don't mean our break tonight, but our break for the next 2 weeks, with some plans for having thought through like what a motion on zoning for industrial land might be that would really get at this challenge of data and protecting industrial zones.
I'd appreciate that, Sarah, because I would like to certainly research what we recommended last time a little bit more and understand that, because I just, it just isn't something that I came to this meeting prepared for. So I certainly would appreciate that.
What do you think, John?
Yes, that sounds fine to me.
Excellent.
Great.
So now we just need to vote on this motion to recommend to City Council.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
George, why don't you make it? It's your motion.
So do you want me to just read off this motion?
Yeah, if you're happy with the wording, or you can tweak it as you read it if you have something that you'd like to change.
I don't see it on my screen. That's my problem.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Yeah.
I think it might be, I'm looking at you at a pretty small monitor today, and I've got two computers running.
Well, I think since you expressed a desire to make the motion, I will read what's on the screen, and then you can certainly say that is the motion that you want to make. So the motion says, motion to recommend to City Council that Gunbarrel be a top priority for sub-community planning.
Yes, I would like to make that motion. Thank you.
Great. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Sarah seconds. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? I'm going to restate the motion. Motion to recommend to City Council that Gunbarrel be top priority for sub-community planning. So with that, Peter?
That's an aye. He's got his hand up.
Aye.
Oh, great. Georgie?
Aye.
Yeah, sorry, I need actual sound. John?
Aye.
Lupita?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye on that one. Great.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. So yeah, during the break, we can all do a little research on our feelings on industrial and how it can be protected, and then maybe have that discussion in an upcoming meeting. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and congratulate the applicant on our site and use review. And thanks to you and to staff for all the great work on this. I think it looks like it's going to be a really impactful residential development. So thank you. Any last words before we move on?
Yeah, just thanks to the board. I mean, as you saw, the project changed considerably, dramatically between concept plan and site review, and that was in large part due to your feedback and thoughts and guidance. Also, thank you to all of the citizens who contributed to that conversation as well. So again, thanks for the hard work tonight, and we appreciate the feedback and obviously the approval.
Great. And on behalf of the board, I'll echo what you just said. We do want to thank the public for all your great input and I think very insightful input. And we hope that people will feel comfortable over the years as we go forward. So thank you so much. All right. Excellent. So with that, we're ready to move on to matters. We don't have anything in the agenda specific, but I'll just ask, are there any matters from other board members from the planning board?
I have a topic I'd like to touch on. So the new language that we use at the beginning of our meetings about respectful dialogue. I would like to consider adding a little bit of language. I'm struck sometimes at planning board that sometimes members of the public assume motive on the part of other members of the public with whom they may just have a policy difference, or they assume motive on the part of members of the planning board with whom they assume that we might take a certain position or not. And I think that it really makes discourse and participation more fraught and more polarizing than it needs to be. And I'm wondering if there's some opportunity for staff to consider some additional phrase or sentence that might encourage a focus on policies and less on personal than the person.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I mean sometimes I know that especially with board members, sometimes people just don't understand what our role is. Like, people don't understand that we didn't we didn't devise the proposals, but you do see people who will say, "Oh, you've been pushing this through," and we don't really do that. We just listen to the evidence and make our decisions based on what's put before us. So I don't know what we can really do about that other than just correct those. But I understand what you're. It's probably not a good practice to be questioning other people's motives or in general.
I'm actually less concerned about what people assume of us, because as you just said, we have to make decisions within the frameworks of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan and the Land Use Code and whatever other associated frameworks apply to whatever project that we're looking at. But I often find the public comment period to be far more polarizing than maybe healthy for a healthy community.
Sarah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And let me take this back to the team. The wording was very much orchestrated with the council direction and for the council meetings. But I would like to take that thought back to our team. And if nothing else, I think at the beginning, there can be some suggestions of, I know that I do this with other meetings a lot of, let's assume the best intent of everyone here.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yep, I love it. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Dean. Great. Anything else from the board? All right. And Charles, anything from Planning Department?
Nothing from staff.
Nothing from staff. All right. And Hella, any additional matters from the attorney?
Nothing from me, thank you.
All right. Great. Well, we're good. We're about to head towards an actual recess. So, Cindy, calendar check. Are we really headed towards a recess? Make our day, Cindy.
Sorry, stress. Yes. We won't see July 15th, and that will be a joint meeting with TAB. So it won't be a regular-ish meeting. So have fun.
Can I ask a question? In the TAB meeting, do we have a project in front of us, or more like a study session?
Oh,
it's to review the 60% recommendation of the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan draft.
60, meaning 60% along the way to 100% decision. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, and while we're talking about calendar check, we know that it's likely that Lisa Smith will be on parental leave for a certain amount of time, and I know that there has been precedent since I've been on the board of actually asking the board to approve an extended absence. When I went to New Zealand, I missed a few meetings, and we actually brought it to the board for a vote. Helen, would you suggest that we try to knock that out tonight and approve an absence if we're comfortable with?
I can touch on
that. On leave for the next.
If Hella wants to touch on that, but we had a meeting with her, Hella and I did, and and Hella, if I'm incorrect, but I believe we okayed, and I don't know if the board has to vote on this, but we okayed an absence for her for 3 months. So that puts her through September 23rd-ish. Yeah.
I was having trouble. I remembered that we talked about 3 months, and there is a provision in the charter. I was going to look this up during the meeting, David, and I didn't.
It was going to be the 16th of September, but that meeting has been canceled due to a Yom Kippur holiday. So that's what I put down on my calendar anyway. It was September 23rd is the first meeting she could come back. However, that was her being at this meeting. So.
Okay, so September 23rd, that would mean, let's see, missing 1 in September, 2 in August, and
Don't forget July.
but Lisa's recused on CU South, so we could really just say 2 in July because we're going to have alternates for the 22nd.
But wait a minute. So we're already having an alternate for her on CU South. Got it.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's a provision that states council may remove any member of any board by a majority vote for conflict of interest violation, any other violation of applicable law, regulation, or policy, non-attendance to duty, failure to attend 3 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings without a leave of absence approved by a majority of the board, or any other cause. So just to give her a peace of mind, it might be nice to do a vote to approve 3 months of leave of absence. She told us that she thought she might attend, but I think she doesn't know yet what to expect, and anything is possible. And 3 months is.
So I move that the board approve a leave of absence for Lisa Smith for 3-month time period through until December 23rd. September 23rd. Did I say something? Did I say December?
You
September
said
23rd.
I'll second that motion.
I'm sorry. Who was that? Sarah?
That was Sarah.
Great. All right. So I'll just go ahead and do a visual. Peter, can you see everybody to see if they all give a
Yes.
yes vote?
Yes, we've got, no one's denying Lisa her time here.
Yeah. So
Everyone's
unless
in
you tell me
favor.
otherwise, Peter, I will assume that we have a unanimous vote too.
Correct, a unanimous vote.
Great. And I appreciate that because I owe the board for the time that they approved my absence. So yes, now that you mentioned that, Hella, I do remember that we did that just to show support. So that's great.
Yeah, and it allow her to stay away without having to worry about not being here.
And we can always, again, like we did with the CU South, if we think that we're in trouble with a quorum, we can always request an alternate. Although I assume that we can probably get through these 6 or so meetings without 5 or 6 meetings without an alternate. So, great. All right. Anything else, Cindy, on the calendar check? Or?
No, I don't believe so.
So I didn't catch when our next meeting is?
July 15th.
15th. Okay. You're on the calendar. Good. Thanks.
Yep, the joint meeting with TAB. And any observations from tonight? Any debrief items anybody would like to bring up? I apologize for the technical issues. We'll try not.
I appreciate the more frequent breaks. I thought that was really good tonight.
Great. Yeah, and I actually kind of screwed up. I really am trying to do them almost every hour, but all right. Thank you so much. Well, with that, let's go ahead and adjourn. Enjoy your recess, and we'll see you all on the 15th of July.
Good night, everyone.
Happy vacation.
Bye.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great night. Bye.